afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
We don't have a lot of persons here.
Yeah, it is.
Where is everybody? Is there a different link?
Hello.
Okay.
No, there's not.
Okay, I guess we better text some people because there's no party with 1, 2, 3, 4. There's no party with 4 people. All right. Where's the text thing here? I went to the meeting, people. All right, well, we're waiting for folks to come in, just checking everybody's mics. Karen, you're going to need a light.
I need a light. Hold on.
You need more light. It is so dark where you are. Abrar, your mic is working. Good afternoon.
Yep.
I missed that.
Oh, I was saying, yep, yeah, I'm here.
Oh, thank you. Elaine,
I'm here.
Karen Keys Gamara,
I'm here.
Karen Corbett Sanders.
I'm here with the lights on.
Let's see if that's, yeah, much better. Carl
I'm here.
or Jane.
Here.
Hello, hello. Melanie.
Yes, here. Hi.
Hi. Rashna.
I'm here.
Stella.
Hey, everybody, I'm here.
Tammy.
She's here, but she can't hear anyone. So we're trying to help her with that.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I see that she put something there. Megan.
Here.
All right. And then we have some staff with us. Dr. Braybrand.
Hi.
Dr. Ivy. Hello, sir. Dr. Ivy. Mr. Smith.
Hello, hello.
And
We're here.
hello, hello. And Mr. Foster? I don't see Mr. Foster in the lineup. Can I procure him? Because there may be some questions that he will need to answer.
I invited him. Let me check on that. I'm going to step off for just a moment.
Absolutely. While you do that, we'll try to see if we can get Tammy back in. While we get them all squared away, I have to apologize, folks, for sending you 2 emails in the last half hour. It was supposed to be 1, but I was too quick on the trigger for the first one. The first email has a link to some of the processes and agreements that I'm hoping we'll be able to get to after the board priorities section. And it also has a document that is attached that reflects all of the post-its that were typed up for our work from our work last Saturday. The last email has just the list of items. We have 10 categories that we discuss on Saturday that we have post-its and documents on. We are hoping to discuss the top 3 that had the most members who wanted to review them. That's the discussion rules, the use of task force teams, and time management. So our agenda for this evening will be to begin with the board priorities, which I've noticed everybody is working in, and then move into the discussion rules, the task force teams, and time management. This is a little bit more informal, so if it's okay with everybody, I'll just go with first names. I see that Tammy has joined us back in. Tammy, are you able to hear us?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay,
You are all
good.
in. I
Thank you.
hate that. I sent an email last night just to try to get a structure going for this afternoon, where we are going to start with the board priorities. And I'm hoping that everybody had an opportunity to just glance at the list of items. And again, the goal behind this section is to see what can come off of our very, very busy plates, as well as staff. So I'm hoping to do a few rounds of discussions, a few rounds of speeches. But the first round, just really making sure that we have full understanding of any issues. This is the clarifying questions period, where it's only going to be devoted to questions only, so that staff could answer, and these questions may or may not impact your ratings of these categories. So be thinking about that. We'll go through and get all the clarifying questions out, and we'll do another round where we'll have people share whatever feedback that they want to give. And after that second round of feedback, then we take a pause, have everyone complete their ratings, and then see where consensus falls. And then we'll take it from there. When we have consensus in various areas, that will be the direction to staff. There may be some areas where there are questions regarding what does the postpone mean versus, and I see a typo that I'm going to fix right now, postponing versus revising the delivery approach. We might have that conversation once we get to that consensus section. Ms. Smallberg, it will be very helpful if you are able to display the chart for us, even though it may not be live, because I do understand people will be working on it as questions are asked and answered. But minimally, there will be an opportunity for our work to be more transparent if that chart were posted. Okay, so we're going to dig right in. Excuse me right there while I change where I put this. We're going to just jump right in with the first round of questions. If there are any questions that exist for school board members so that they could have better clarity regarding what is posted on this board priorities chart, this will be our opportunity to ask that. So just questions, not comments or advocacy at this point. So if you have questions regarding any item from 1 to 47, this will be the time. Before I call on the question on folks who have questions, I want to be sure that Dr. Brabrand has returned, as well as Mr. Foster being with us. Dr. Brabrand, are you with us?
Yes, Chairman Anderson, I am back, and I wanted to communicate that Mr. Foster, our division counsel, is also here and is available for any support during your conversations and deliberations this afternoon. Thank you.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, so without any further ado, we will start with questions that we may have. And I ask that if you have multiple questions, just ask them 2 at a time so staff has an opportunity to respond. We're going to start with Karen Sanders.
Thanks, Ricardi. Just 2 quick questions. One is regarding the absence of an issue listed, which is the restraint and seclusion. Is there a reason that we don't have that on this list? And just want to make sure that we keep that on the list, we add it to the list for us as a priority. And then the second is regarding the committee reports. Is there anything that would preclude us from appointing people for 2 years rather than 1 year, and staggering the presentation of committee reports throughout the year? I don't believe that there's any legal reason not to, but I'd like a confirmation on that. I do recognize that there may be 3 committees that we have to do every year, being ACSD, Title I, and I think the other one is MSAOC, but I'm not sure. So those are my 2 questions.
Just before Mr. Foster, I know Ms. Mulberg has had conversations with you about those committees. If we could start there. If you all notice, those committees are currently at the very bottom. I think lines 28, 41, they were highlighted in yellow because of that very matter. So Mr. Foster, can you please respond to that question? And Karen, you will see that I also added restraint and seclusion to the very bottom, and I forgot an I there, so that we can respond to it as well. Mr. Foster?
Yeah, good afternoon, Madam
Ricardo,
Chair.
real quick, did you just add it or something? Because I don't remember seeing it.
I just added it.
Oh, okay, thank you. I was like,
No,
okay.
I just said it. I just added it while you were talking.
Magic.
Thank you.
That's what Google Docs does for you. So Karen, I'm sorry, Mr. Foster, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Regarding the appointment annually, I believe that the three that Ms. Corbett Sanders listed are the ones that are required to have appointments annually, but I certainly can confirm that. We were also asked, or I should say we were asked earlier today to look into the question of which committees are required by law to put out an annual report. And if the board would like to hear that list, I'm certainly prepared to provide it.
Please do.
Right. So the research that we did this afternoon.
John, I'm having a little bit of a hard time hearing you. If you could speak up just a little bit more, that would be helpful.
Right. So the research we did this afternoon confirmed that the following advisory committees are required to submit an annual report: School Health Advisory Committee, Advanced Academic Programs, Title I Parent Advisory Committee, Students with Disabilities, and I think that's it.
Can you repeat that list once more, please?
Yes, it's School Board Advisory Committee, Advanced Academic Programs Advisory Committee, Title I Parent Advisory Committee, Advisory Committee for Students with Disabilities, requires that they submit quote unquote periodic reports. The bylaws require that the report be annual.
Karen?
But it's not, okay, so the question though is they may require it in their bylaws, but is it a statutory requirement? And then this, because you can always work with changing bylaws. The second piece is there anything that precludes us from doing multi-year appointments, which gives them more time to unpack and go into detail on issues?
Yeah, so I did not know that issue was going to be on today's agenda, and certainly we can research that, Ms. Corbett Sanders, to see whether we would have the ability for multi-year appointments. And if it would help the board, we can certainly look into that while this work session's ongoing.
I would appreciate that, because that would then allow us to stagger when they actually present their reports as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, John. And just for everybody else's edification, on line 48, we have an addition for you to respond to. Are there any other questions regarding what is before us? Ashna.
Yeah. I just have a quick question on some of these. You know, when first of all, I really appreciate this. This is really helpful to kind of see where we're at on this. But I'm wondering with some of these topics, is there a way to say revise process? So I'm thinking in particular of our forum topic schedule. Like I'd like to look at the process for forum topics and bringing priorities to the board, but that may not be the purview of this. I just wanted to ask if that's part of this conversation, or are we really just trying to stick to what we have on our current agenda?
It could certainly be part of that conversation. So that's also an opportunity. That would be an R in terms of revising the work approach rather than a K, keeping it as is. Do you have something that you'd like to give us to think about when we go to the section for feedback?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And, I won't take it too long, but I feel like I would like to see a process, around forum topics or bringing board priorities before us that is in some ways able to be tied a little bit more to our strategic plan or working in conjunction with our strategic plan. I feel like right now it's almost just people putting in different things that are their priorities and well researched and well worked on and all of that stuff. But it'd be nice to find a way to sort of, as a board, come to consensus on our priorities. That's, I'm sort of fleshing that out, but I think and I think our staff may even appreciate sort of more direction around what we're looking for our work sessions on rather than kind of disparate topics as we bring them. So I just like to see some process put in place of how we bring board priorities, whether it's individual members or the consensus or some process for both to the staff in a way that maybe is a little more strategic. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Sure. And I think, Rashna, there's definitely room for that. Just in this conversation, given that we are in the pandemic, we're trying to determine what makes sense for us to take off the plate for right now. Whenever these things come back, we still have the opportunity, I believe, to talk about how to refine the process or the processes so that they can reflect what you've just discussed.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to ask and so put that out in the air. I recognize this is probably not the right moment to delve deep into that conversation.
Okay. We're going to keep going with questions only, and then comments are going to be the second round. This round is questions only. Laura Jane, and then Elaine. It jumped for me here.
Sure. I guess one of my questions was when we talked about a couple of areas in this prioritization, we were looking for feedback from staff about how long things would be. And so I just didn't know, is that like part of the conversation later, or where do we find that?
I think you could start now. Do you have something in specific that you'd like for staff to respond to? Because there's a very long list here. It would be helpful, I think, to narrow down the things that you're looking for some feedback on.
Sure. I think I really struggled, I will say, with the forum topics piece. Because as we mentioned Saturday, I think that there are forum topics that take a huge amount of staff effort and time that would potentially pull them away from different things. And then I think there are some that aren't. And so I just struggle with all forum topics are not created equal. So I hate the idea of saying, no, we're not going to have any more forum topics, because there are some things that really do have to happen, even though we're in the middle of a pandemic. And so I guess their feedback on, is there a way that we could change the forum process even, where in our forum topic page, there's a component for staff to fill in how much time is needed, or what is staff's sense of what would be a better and more productive way to introduce new things?
Dr. Brabrand, Dr. Ivy, Mr. Smith, would anybody like to, or Dr. Presidio?
Well, let me make an initial comment. And I'm taking the spirit of the retreat that I so appreciate being invited to this weekend, which I thought was very powerful, for this group to take a look at how we do our work together in partnership with the leadership team of Fairfax County Schools is very appreciated. So it's an honor to be here today and follow up on that. I think the nugget of that, Ms. Cohen, is all forum topics are not created equal, is something you're saying as a board member. Board members over the years have felt very passionate about a topic. It gets on forum, it gets assigned as work, and there's a tension that it's a topic a board member is very passionate about. And in forum, in general, there's been consensus to move forward with making that a deliverable for staff. And I think what you're asking is, how can we get some more information from staff up front to scope it out help the board decide among X number of forum topics, what ones you want to prioritize. And it may be, in a sense, something for the board to think about. Do you want to put forum topics out for the year and then decide the prioritization of those forum topics on a year-to-year approach, much like you do your audit plan? I don't know, and I invite others on my staff, John, Francis, Marty, to add any comments you would have that may be the same or different from what I've shared.
Anyone else?
Should I take that as a no?
Okay, well, it is what it is. Thank you.
Oh, I think Dr. Ivy was going to speak. Sorry, Dr. Ivy.
No, I was just going to say I agree. I think the more we can discuss it up front and learn just what's the expectation, how does it align or fit it within the prioritizations and the work we're currently doing, and what realistically we can and can't do. And if we had that discussion up front, then if it comes to the table, it would help. We would have thought about it, consulted with our staff, versus, just trying to respond in the moment.
And let me add on to that. Actually, to me, the nugget, Ms. Cohen, is all forum topics look good and staff would be willing to work on them, but it's all about, well, how many more foreign topics will be coming? And we don't always know, and we don't know what the workload of those would be. So I think a more strategic approach is either every semester or every year, what are potential foreign topics board members want to engage in, and some prioritization of those that could be ultimately decided with some feedback from staff about the amount of time and effort and alignment to strategic plan objectives. So those are just some pieces of feedback for the board to think about.
What I also think, LJ, is that there seems to be room, no matter what happens with the forum topics as we're discussing it today. I think there's room for maybe governance to take a look and to bring some things back to the board for consideration. Because I think both your comment and Rachna's comment are in alignment with us wanting. There seems to be appetite, using one of Stella's words, for us to do this a little bit differently.
Yeah, I agree. And I just, for the public, like, I think that folks should know, I mean, we have forum topics that have sat around for like a year plus. I know even some of the old board, we tried to, have new folks who were interested to take those on, because there were so many left over. So I think it's just important for folks to know that even as board members, we struggle of what is the way to bring up new information. And a lot of times it's ideas that folks have brought to, constituents have brought to us, but then there doesn't seem to be a great mechanism for how that gets into the system. So I totally agree that I think probably we need a new way to do it, because I think the old way doesn't work. I just was uncertain with the way that it was written, how do you convey that no, maybe forum topics the way they're going, don't want to do it, but there are certainly forum topics that are out there that I think there's a broad consensus needs to be done. So would that be an R to you, Dr. Anderson?
I think that would be an R, but also keep in mind that we could still have a postponement with an R. So those two things are not mutually exclusive. But I'm going to ask everyone, this is the round for questions. You'll have the other round to kind of give your feedback. We just want to be sure that everybody's clear on all of these matters that are in front of us. But Laura Jane, I don't know if there's a place for you to put in, a slash, if you think that what works better for you on that one. Elaine, and then Karen Keys.
Hi, so I had one specific question on number 11. I think it's supposed to be AP and IB homework course load. I guess that was a forum topic. But I know, and I left that one blank because I know that, right now in talking about, how the first quarter went and virtual learning and, how our kids are trying to keep up with their AP and IB, courses, that this is an ongoing discussion. So what I wanted to ask is, am I missing something? Like, is this number 11, is it something other? And it's sort of that big overall picture of, conversations that maybe we need to have with College Board. What is number 11?
I think I'm going to ask the former chair to speak to this because I believe this forum topic came up prior to us getting onto the board. So Karen, can you offer any insight?
Yes, and I actually think Megan is probably the best one to speak to this. This was a forum topic that came up last year on how to address workload and for our students. And it was, staff was going to do some work and come back with recommendations at a work session.
Megan?
Yes. In terms of this one, interestingly, it's also something that Dr. Brabrand brought up more recently from our student rep, Nathan Abudo, and what he's hearing from students, and we're hearing from parents. And FCPS used to have a regulation directive to teachers saying that they needed to have 2 graded assessments per week per student. And that meant 18 graded assessments per quarter per student. In high schools where it's block scheduling, that meant sometimes kids were getting graded every single time they stepped into the classroom in order to meet that need. Under Karen Garza's leadership, it was brought down to 1 graded assessment a week. But students and teachers are still talking about the volume of graded assessments, whether it's homework to quizzes to tests. And so we were talking again about what can we do to go with quality assessments, not quantity. So staff was supposed to be looking at CIS and running the data to show that some teachers have a better balanced workload of graded assessments per their classes, and others it's extremely heavy. But we haven't seen any of the data on that yet. And even though we're dealing with it as a pandemic, I think we should be having some closure on this by the end of this academic year. I don't think this can continue to be pushed off, and it should be a priority if we're really committed to the academic, social, emotional needs of our kids and as well as our teachers.
Yeah, so I guess that's where I'm coming out to is that, I see a lot of people have postponed here, but that is something that, given what was just mentioned, these are ongoing conversations that should be happening right now. Dr. Anderson.
Hey, she's reconnecting. I think we all were bumped off. How odd.
I saw Dr. Brabrand go off, and then I was suddenly off too.
Right?
I was bumped out.
Oh,
Yeah, okay. That happened earlier too.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think
Elaine?
she's back.
Elaine, can you tell me what number you were talking about?
Let's talk about number 11. And I think part of it is that, it sounds to me like it was put on as a forum topic by the previous board, and that's where forum approved came from. I was like, I don't remember this being a forum topic, but it is a very pertinent topic right now. As we've got kids in virtual learning and we're looking at, what can be accomplished during this school year. So, around this whole idea of homework and course load. So,
Ricky, sorry. I wanted to add more information, Elaine, to what Megan said, if that's helpful.
It will be helpful if you had some more information for that. So go ahead.
Sure. So as Megan mentioned, there is in fact a homework policy, and the last time it was updated by a board was in 2004, policy 3205.1. And when when Nathan sent a very articulate letter to the superintendent and school board recently, I reminded the superintendent as well as our governance chair, Mr. Frisch, about that homework policy that the governance committee had pulled a no change memo earlier this year, and we had all agreed that that should go to a work session. So I think, reflecting on what you're saying, Elaine, that yes, there had been this forum approved topic for APIB, but the whole homework policy is slated to be reviewed. And honestly, well, it's in governance, so it isn't on this sheet, but there are ties there, and it does make me wonder about, keeping number 11, the APIB homework piece, if the greater issue was going to be addressed. Thanks for letting me add that.
Thank you. And just a reminder, I'm getting some feedback. If you're not speaking, if you could turn off your mic, that would be helpful. Elaine, did you have any other questions? Because this is the question.
Yeah, so I guess my other question then is, and also given what Ms. Marin just said, I've noticed a number of things in here that really fit under bigger topics. So I guess, is it appropriate to put in R where I'm putting in R is in many cases where I would like to see us look at these issues more strategically, not have staff just work on each thing separately. So for example, number 12, IB in elementary school and middle school, and number 16, which is AAP in middle schools. And then we've got, motions recently that talk about, advanced academics. That should all have a strategic look. So how do we look at these individual items, but look at them in a more strategic view, which I guess is then revising our work approach? So I guess the question is, to make it from a comment to a question, are you viewing the R as the way to have those discussions? Or even from Dr. Braybrand, how, if we look at all of this work, how do we really make sure we're tying these things strategically to the initiatives that we have?
Just to answer very quickly, the R and the postpone, those were just ways that we came up in terms of facilitating how we move this forward, because there's so many items. Because right now, I think the main discussion that we've all been having is just too much to do right now. And when we say revising the work approach, that does, I believe, give us an opportunity to pause and to take some time to bring it back a little bit differently than the way that it has historically happened. So I wanted to be sure that that's articulated. But anything that is an R is going to be a change from the traditional delivery.
All right, I appreciate that. And I do like this format. I do want to compliment you on the format. And I put R around the advisory committee work as well, because of our governance, or because of our committee looking at overall how to approach those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, before Scott, before you speak, I do want to kind of stop and say this. This was quite a bit to do. And I want to be sure that everybody knows that this was just not just me. You know, Stella and Melanie were so instrumental in making sure that we could turn this around essentially in less than 24 hours. So I want to be sure to recognize their efforts as well. The color coding I'll take full credit for, but there were I had a lot of help from Stella and Melanie. So thank you to both of you. Scott, go ahead, and then it's Karen and then Tammy.
2 quick comments, 30 seconds or less. One to the chairman. Chairman Anderson, are the notes available for board members to write in individually, or they're just for the chair?
The notes that are on the document itself?
Yeah, you have a column with notes.
Those were what we received from you after last week, a document that Marcy sent. So it's kind of a shorthand. However, because I was worried about so many people in the document, with the integrity of the document, I didn't want to lose information. I think I protected that section. So I'm going to need some time to unprotect that part of it. So you cannot write in it this evening. If you want, you can add some information if you like under column Q, because that's open and available, I believe, for folks to write into.
So just 2 comments. One, that could be a place if you chose as a board to get at what Elaine was talking about, where you could write in the notes, where you could strategically group some of these priorities together. That's the number one thing I wanted to say. And then the second, while I completely agree with Megan and Karen, I recall the regulation around homework and discussion about it. This APIB, I recall this forum topic being a recommendation from a parent advisory council that Miss Evans, Sandy Evans, brought forward to cap the number of AP and IB courses for a student. And I could be wrong. But
I actually remember Sandy talking about that with me in our transition. That does definitely ring a bell to me. Karen?
That was if I could speak to that too.
Yes.
And my final 5 seconds is, we are going to bring you, including this Thursday, updates around homework, and we're continuing to look at that right now. Dr. Presidio's not here, but we are working on that as we speak, and we'll bring you updates at our RTS presentations.
Thank you, Scott. Tammy and then Stella, why don't you both speak to that? Karen, I'm going to give you a little bit of a pause for right now.
Thank you. And yes, Scott's correct that that was part of it all. But then there was the other part. We realized that the course load is, in some cases, enormous for both the AP and IB curriculum. But when we talked about it, there was a realization that, particularly in the IB, the course load is what it is because it's commanded by, the IB board. And for the AP is what we allowed. We actually did an analysis of so many per year, and I hesitate to say the number we allowed, but everybody was comfortable with that. We did talk to community members about that. But the other part that didn't finish, and Scott, this is on your team, I believe, is several people talked about, well, that is wonderful if we can eliminate the load, but at the same time, then the colleges have to understand what is happening here. And, because there were other school systems and there was that cry by parents is that we needed to maintain, the options of kids to, put their best foot forward as they're applying to colleges in particular. So that was the last part, Scott, where your team was kind of, supposed to go and kind of start the conversation. I know there were people that even talked to people at Harvard and some of the Ivies about what could we do. There were board members that did that. So that was the other part of it. And it's a big conversation.
Thank you. Stella, do you have additional and different information?
I actually think Tammy captured it very well. It actually came when Sandy was a liaison, and I actually served on the SHAC committee. And it was one of the recommendations from them as well. And the questions surrounding the colleges and everything else that Tammy shared eloquently. So it was a large conversation beyond just what we're showing here.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, this is Megan. I'd like to clarify on this.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm remembering this maybe slightly differently from what Stella had just said. It is correct that the proposal was looking at the course load, but then when we did what Tammy's point was, part A was you can't limit AP course offerings when the IB kids have to take the load they take. And so you'd be just basically having an inequity of kids who want to take AP courses at the same volume and number that the IB kids have access to. So then the conversation became, you can't necessarily limit the number of classes, the number of their course load, but you can address the homework component of both of these advanced courses. And that was what we're supposed to be doing. So part A, course load, we weren't going to limit. Part B was address quantity over quality. And that piece is still left out. And I'll talk, during the advocacy piece, but that was supposed to be, staff was supposed to work on, and they should be bringing it back to us.
Thank you. We are going to move on with the rest of the questions that are still outstanding because we want to be sure that there's clarity before people finalize, or at least work towards finalizing their ratings. So I'm going to move on to the next question. Elaine, did you have any additional questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen Keys-Gamarra, and then Tammy. And folks, we're just going to focus on questions because we're trying to get clarity at this point.
Okay, hopefully I don't get kicked out for having my camera on. I am wondering if it would be helpful, Dr. Brabrand, to look at topics that board members want to bring forward in a way that actually has the requirement to evaluate staff time before it's brought to the board. That's my first question. I guess I'll stop there.
Ms. Keys-Gamarra, just an FYI, we did have that as a suggestion. You may have been kicked out, but that was a suggestion that I believe was made either by Rashna or Laura Jane, just at the top of this conversation.
No, I heard what they said. I'm trying to segue to something else though. I think that because that is something I already do. It may not be realized, but there's the suggestion of having that presented, but also having a regular discussion with respect to what our priorities are. When I was listening to Rachna, I felt that perhaps that may be a better way. And I'm wondering how Dr. Brabrand might respond to that.
I could definitely support us doing an assessment up front early in the forum topic development to give an idea of time and timeline and any additional resources that would be required, financial or otherwise. So very open to that.
And what about a more regular discussion with respect to what our priorities are? My concern with respect to the suggestion that we, handle this like audit topics is that as board members, our responsibility to a large extent is to our constituents. And so we don't have control of when things come forward necessarily, or when an issue may arise, such as restraint and seclusion last year. And so I'm just trying to figure out a way that might be more palatable for us. The other concern I have, and this one goes for Mr. Foster, With respect to committee reports, we have given these committees a charge as to what their responsibilities are. And we have basically told them that they will be reporting to us with respect to those outstanding reports. We created an obligation as to allowing those reports and how we move forward. Because I'm also concerned about at the bottom of the list, we talked about reports in May. So what are our legal obligations with respect to receiving those reports?
Yes, thanks, Madam Chair. I think I read earlier the committees in which we were required to provide annual reports. I think that we're also in our governance manual.
John, you're breaking up a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Madam Chair. For some reason, I've got a bad connection. Can you hear me now?
I can. And if you break up again, maybe we'll give you a minute to just re-log in. And I could share the list that you shared earlier as well.
There are some committees that are required by Virginia law or federal law to submit annual reports, and those are I understood Ms. Keys-Gamarra's question to be, if you as a board are also establishing a requirement separate and apart from the law, is that creating a mandate? Is that your question, Ms. Keys-Gamarra?
It is certainly part and parcel of it, yeah.
Yes, and I think that that is the case, and we would need to look at the specific language. If the board is requiring that in the governance manual or a policy, then depending on the language, it could be viewed as a mandate.
I'm very concerned about the message we're sending to people who are doing really working at our request and what message we might be sending them. And with respect to the workload and having a regular way to look at it, I might suggest if we are amenable to task forces, some type of task force, that there may be a way for that task force to work either with governance or separate and apart, however it's decided, come up with ways to combine some of these things and also to make sure that all our board members are understanding some of the historical background, et cetera. So that would be.
Ms. Gamarra, I just want to be sure that we're clear. We want to be sure we answer all questions right now. You will have an advocacy component, but right now it's just the question component because we want to make sure we have clarity. So we want to be laser focused on just the questions for this segment.
I got you.
Thank you. I think Melanie is next and then Megan.
No, you missed me.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Tammy, I don't know why I crossed your name off. Please, Tammy, go ahead.
All right, thank you. I want to make a comment. It's an answer to a question. I believe it was Karen Corbett Sanders. Karen, I don't call this on the board yet, but the committee terms, we changed from 2 years to 1 as a board. And we did that because there were changes in the board, and the 2-year committee slot then it did not allow new board members who came on either midterm or for whatever reason to have their own committee appointee. So that's why we changed all the committee terms to 1 year. So I just wanted to remind people of that bit of history. So my two questions are then number 10 and number 26, and this I guess for Scott. I see number 10, a lot of people put and maybe this was addressed during a Saturday's work session that I wasn't able to be there at, on 10 and 26. For 10 is the strategic plan goal reports, and 26 is the annual capital improvement plan. And a lot of people put R's, and I'm not exactly sure how that could possibly work, because the strategic plan is basically, when we're not in a pandemic situation, it's the way we move our work forward. It is the document, is the living document that we go, and this board hasn't even had the opportunity to deal with that. But also with the CIP, I mean, there are monies and there are things that have to happen. So my questions for that is, did I miss something? Did we talk about that? And Scott, is there any way, I don't know how we could not keep those two things.
Just to confirm, Tammy, we did not get an opportunity to speak about this at all during during the retreat. We ran out of time, hence why we're here. And so I know Mr. Smith did talk about the goal reports a little bit, and I believe at number 26, number 26 was slightly discussed, I believe last week when we had the initial conversations with Jeff. But Scott or Marty, can somebody please respond to those questions?
Yeah, Tammy, and I think the quick answer, Marty, add anything, is we would still submit the reports to the board, but that could be submitted in a Brave Brand briefing, a Friday letter, and then follow up as needed, strategic follow up on a targeted part of the report could happen, but that we didn't have to go through, especially this year with the pandemic. Several of the metrics are not available simply because the data cannot be collected because of the end of the year.
Okay, I get that for that one, Scott, but what about CIP? I don't see
Marty, do you want to speak to CIP?
So I wasn't privy to the conversation with Mr. Plattenberg, but if I see that we have a portion of the board who say that it's important to keep, we know that that does drive the work of the system, and that it would be important to keep the CIP presentation as part of the regular board calendar. As we think about budget, as we think about CIP, those are the items that I feel like we need to have regular touch points with the board, and especially as we both have a county component as well, where information is shared with the county in February around both the budget and the CIP.
I could also add, I don't know if Jeff is there with us, and Megan, if you could also add to this, because I remember both you and I had commentary when Jeff spoke to this. We had, and also Elaine, I think you were the meeting manager, we had a conversation perhaps doing a CIP light, just to give a little bit more relief to the intensity of that work, particularly in the pandemic environment. Does that ring a bell to anyone else besides me?
So, Dr. Anderson, it's Elaine. Absolutely, and I, even in preparation for the meeting, as the meeting manager, Carl and I had a conversation with Jeff. And this whole idea of, given the membership numbers that we're seeing, in that membership report that we had, and this being a very different year as far as trying to look at projections. So there was a discussion about doing the CIP a little bit differently this year, maybe focusing more on what are the capital projects that we have ongoing, what's the budget around that, kind of a project for each big capital project that we have ongoing, and less focus on trying to do a capacity projections, since the September 30th numbers from this year are not reliable. That's where I think where all these R's are coming from.
And so for that piece, I would agree that we're, in terms of a CIP, like our projections, that we wouldn't be making recommended changes to those projections. And so we wouldn't necessarily have a lot of discussion around growth, et cetera. There could be opportunities to discuss other things if the board chose to, but it wouldn't be that full CIP process, correct?
Tammy?
Sorry, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I left that screen. I wasn't sure if I left my mic on. Okay, so there is a possibility to do CIP light. The strategic plan could be done in a goal report. Yeah, I got that. I will have to think on that. And then I guess my question is I left some of my items blank, and regarding this may be just for you, but it is with the committee reports, particularly FATE, ACSD. So we're talking about those are committees that have yet to report to the board, and you're talking about just in light of this pandemic, you're changing that part. That's what I understand.
That's correct. That's what's on the table.
That's what's on the table there. And then the other parts are, maintaining the May, June agenda to keep, but to look at that in terms of what we typically do, right?
Right. Particularly because we're still expecting, by all accounts, to still be in this pandemic, and it's hard to see into that crystal ball. So just trying to manage all of the trauma and all of the work as best as we can. And I think outside of the revisions that we're talking about and improving processes, much of this is just a temporary solution to the pandemic that we're in. Not all of them, but much of them.
Some of them, yes. Okay, all right, that's all I have right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Folks, just a reminder, we're continuing with questions. So Melanie, then Megan, and then Stella.
Yeah, I did just want to add a piece of information to the question asked earlier about the committee reports, because item 19 on the chart, the Public Engagement Committee work to revamp advisory committees, is one of those topics that intertwines with all those committee reports, right? So currently the Public Engagement Committee is tasked with revamping that. That would take some staff time. That could implement or implicate what happens with those committee reports. My question is for Dr. Brabrand and Dr. Presidio, if he's on. Can you please talk about number 17, anti-racism work division-wide? This was from the form that was approved that Laura Jane had put forth, I think it was in May. This is different than the anti-racism policy, which was put forth during the curriculum presentation in, I think it was September. So can you explain what that entails to do anti-racism work division-wide and what the staff impact is of that work? Thank you.
Yes, some of that anti-racism work is included in our equity action plan. For example, we are finalizing right now, we met today in leadership team, even in the middle of return to school, for a specific template when we are dealing with racial slurs, hate speech, and other racial incidences in schools, a specific flow chart for how administrators should be handling those incidences. So we are doing work around anti-racism, and it would be something that we could fold back to Elaine's idea of where we could strategically fold it into our equity action plan. Again, find the right time to schedule that or simply submit a report. I see that some of the folks in the notes want to wait for our new CEO, which we hope to bring to the board very soon. My recommendation for a new CEO, and then let that person bring the full plan. So, but the anti-racism work is strategies around how to deal with racist incidences in our schools, how to be clear in our professional development, and how to put out more clearly in our communications up front when you go to our website or look at our materials from schools that we are taking an anti-racist stance in our schools.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess what I'm looking is to really quantify what that is. You know, there are a number of topics. You know, is it diversifying the teacher workforce? You know, that would be like a set, succinct task. Is it, you know, the anti-racism policy is its own thing that's in governance. So it's like we can say yes, go forward with this, but it's really hard to understand the explicit projects. You know, is it the curriculum work? So it was, you know, we all seem interested in this. It's just very unclear what kind of ripple effect that will have on staff work.
I think the fairest answer is I would need, and again, we were all doing this from Saturday to now about who to bring, and we're working on return to school tonight with other people who are not here, is I would want to pull Sloan, Kathleen, and Leona together. I do think, again, like Elaine said, I think some of this can fall under the equity action plan that has elements around curriculum work, anti-racist work, working with our administrators and teachers, additional professional development, our hiring process, and Dr. Ivy has been leading a team meeting about how we're going to handle hiring or lack thereof of diverse teachers in our schools. So I think these are some topics that can be brought together and maybe put under the equity action plan.
Yeah, like fleshed out so that we can understand if one team is really, you know, busy on something. Yeah.
So
Okay,
I think the question you're asking, some of these board priorities maybe are too broad for the board to clearly know whether you're keeping it or revising it. So we may need to go back as staff and put out what the deliverables look like for these board priorities.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Dr. Anderson, is it appropriate for me to respond to Melanie?
Yes, because I think she was referring to your forum topic, so please clarify.
No, I think it's a good question of like, is this too big for staff capability right now, especially given that we don't have a CEO. When we passed the forum topic, we did still have one. So I recognize that people may be in a different mindset than they were then. You know, I think once the forum topic is approved, I recognize it certainly doesn't belong to me. But as the maker of the topic, if it seems more appropriate to wait for a comprehensive conversation with a new CEO, you know, I understand that that may be more appropriate given the situation that we currently find ourselves in. So not trying to change anybody's vote. Mine was a keep. But certainly if folks feel like it's more appropriate to move that to wait until we have a chief equity officer, I understand that.
What number is that? Is that 17?
It is.
Okay.
Yes, 17.
Thank you. Melanie, were you complete in your questions?
Yes.
Thank you. Megan and Stella?
I'm good. Thank you. No question.
I think Megan was first.
Oops.
Okay, thank you. I'm just working between the two documents to just see where the questions were. I did want to provide clarity just during my turn to something Melanie mentioned on the homework policy not having been revised since 2004. That's because Dr. Garza had a grading policy task force, grading and homework policy task force that she created somewhere between 2016, 2017. And that's when they took our existing policy, which was good, but high level, and then they revised it. And that was the part about the number of graded assessments per week that teachers needed to produce for students. So that's why it may not look like anything was done since 2004, but yet there was a lot of division activity and board work in support of that activity back in that 2016, 2017. I think there was 200 people on that task force in general. So I do want to make sure people understand this was the homework piece that task force recommended doing additional work on because they couldn't get to all of it. So I do hope that people recognize the merits of still doing that one. In terms of the school boundaries, number 21. So again, that's separate from bringing in the boundary consultant report, which is number 9. Correct? They're going to be 2 different work streams.
I'm sorry, Megan, could you say that again? The boundary consultant? Sure. Give me those lines again, I'm sorry.
So number 21 is school boundaries for Glen Forest and Langley McLean. Number 9 was doing the boundary consultant report. And so my inquiry was getting confirmation that
because they're asking.
I think somebody has their mic on. Go ahead, Megan.
Yeah, so again, I was just, I hope my timer doesn't keep going because I keep having to say this 3 times.
Fine. You're absolutely fine.
Yeah, it's number 9 and number 21. So 9 is boundary consultant report. 21 is just school boundaries for those 2 school feeder patterns. But one really needs to get done. The other one doesn't have to get done in tandem. It could be
no, they're not mutually exclusive. Actually, they were both working kind of on parallel paths. I think in big picture, because this is something that Elaine and I were working on, we would have loved for the report to drive the work of these 2 school boundaries, but it hasn't worked out in that way. So they're independent projects at this point.
Okay, thank you. Number 25, I noticed a number of us have not answered that one yet on TJ admissions. I think that's a tough one to answer to because I believe we're scheduled for next week with the superintendent to bring us more information. So I don't know how we would have answered that one any other way. I mean, I can have an opinion on how aggressively we go into staff work on that, but can you just maybe someone explain why that really is?
You're definitely right. And a number of the items are listed just to give a scope of the work that is before us. Many of the items that are listed, we have to do, we must do. Much of the budget work, much of the CIP work, restraint and seclusion. There are many things here that we must do, and it's really a non-decision. And they were just listed just to give a sense of the scope of what is before us and staff. And that is definitely one of them because the ship has sailed a little bit.
Right. And then I guess the only other question I had on a lot of this was you basically took our entire FY 21 calendar, which we have through June 30th. It sort of said, look, we may have a better handle on the pandemic by early spring, but we're going to go ahead and see how this impacts everything we do through June 30th. And so marking things like postpone is sort of tough because where I'm sitting here right now is postpone everything while we're sitting here in early November trying to figure out how do we educate our kids the best way and safest way possible. And, postponing until, a date certain, it makes it tough because I don't know if I'm postponing something for 6 months or 9 months or whatever. So I think that's
the best way to kind of think about that is it wouldn't happen in the most traditional sense of the calendar. And it could be, and we have to be able to respond to this, if the pandemic continues the way that it is right now, maybe it's postponed a little bit longer. If our work gets a little bit less, maybe it comes back a little bit earlier. We'll have to be flexible around that. It's hard to put that specific time period, but it's all of what you described and perhaps more. It could be 6 months or it could be more. It's just not on the traditional calendar because our trajectory right now, we just have too much to do and staff has too much to do. So,
and then can someone clarify 15 and 16 student town halls and AAP middle schools?
I can speak to one of them because one of them is mine. The AP middle schools, that was my forum topic that was presented just a couple of weeks, well, no, a couple of months ago. Student town halls, I believe that was another forum topic that was presented by Abrar, if I remember correctly, in early January. Does that ring a bell to Abrar or Karen?
It was,
Yeah, Kimberly and I did it.
it was Kimberly bringing it forward, and
Okay.
and she had originally done it with, I think, Ryan, and then when Ryan went off the board, Abrar became the co-sponsor.
She did it with Sandy, and I
have it. Yeah.
That's what it was.
Abrar, I have it in front of me. I just pulled it. So yeah, it was Kimberly, and she did it with Sandy Evans. And the request was to work with the schools to ensure that every student had a voice at the school. Because some schools were better at having advisory homerooms and classrooms and making sure that students had a format in which to express their voices to administrators and other key people at the school. And so the ask was for us to work with principals and other school staff and bring back ways to further encourage student engagement at every high school.
Thank you, Dr. Ivy.
Mm-hmm.
Again, was that the last of your questions?
Just the forum topics, number 20. I know other people were kind of expressing the same concern. I left that blank so far because I think I feel like it could completely depend on the forum topic itself. So I'm leaning toward that we should keep it, and then it'll be our responsibility to talk to each other with every proposal on whether or not it's time sensitive. So is that what was meant by it?
Absolutely. I think the conversation regarding it was to maybe save the time so that we can either do some of the other work that is so much more pressing or engage with constituent work, because each forum topic creates more work. Each forum topic, for the most part, not all of them, let me take that back. Each forum topic then gets slotted for a work session, which is time that is already super precious. And so that's where this was going. Do we just take a short break from the forum topics? Do we just stop and then pick it up in 6 months? Not eliminating altogether, but maybe just having a pause. I think that's been part of the conversation. But I'm sure people will speak to that during their advocacy period.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Karen, do you have questions, or was your hand up from last time?
Yes, my question is, we've got a number of places where Scott has volunteered to provide things in writing to the board. And I just want to have a better understanding of what that means in writing, because in the past, and the goal reports are a great example. The goal reports up until a point in time were actually quite detailed written reports that could be delved into by the board members, and based on that written report, they could ask questions, but the questions tended to be much more fine-tuned because they because the written record was there and it made it easier to understand. So my question is this a commitment from staff that if we rely more heavily on reports provided to the board rather than having work sessions, is it a commitment to have those reports actually be detailed and in written form rather than just a PowerPoint?
Yeah, absolutely. And let me let Mr. Smith speak to that. In fact, we have a draft approach for our goal reports that we can provide to the board that way and then get your all's feedback. But Mr. Smith?
No, we can provide those detailed reports. We've developed them with our departments. We have analysis with the data that we'll be providing to the board. and can also use other opportunities throughout the budget process as we're bringing presentations to the board for board members to ask for clarification and possibly ask us to address certain issues or certain questions about the strategic goal report.
So I think before any of us can make a decision on that, it would be helpful for your draft plan that you were suggesting or revisions to be shared with the whole board, because I personally don't feel like I'm capable of giving a green light to something that I don't know what the structure is. And I do know that and I don't know what caused it, but we moved away from the detailed reports in the past. And I for one, think it's helpful to have the data and the detailed reports.
So I don't have the same narrative that we moved away from detailed reports. We've completed reports for all 4 goals, and we can share those with the board and use that to inform further reports. But we are almost complete with the goal reporting documents that Mr. Smith and his team and our departments have been working on. Even as
that would be very helpful to be shared.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. And now we will have since there are no other questions on the table, we will have a quick turn for people to just share their advocacy. It is 5 o'clock. We're just asking for you to be as succinct as possible so that folks understand where you are on the issues that seem to be of greater concern. You do not have to speak on every matter, but obviously you can, but some of them are, by looking at where people have placed their ratings, some of these pretty much have taken consensus that has been arrived. After we have this opportunity where people share what their thoughts are regarding what we have going on here, we are going to take just a quick 5-minute break where people complete their ratings, and then we will tally up the consensus, and that will essentially be the direction to the staff. We may have some areas where there's a little bit more nuance in terms of for example, one that we were talking about is the forum topic, where we might talk about changing the process, maybe going back to governance committee. So those are things that we could certainly take care of a little bit later on. But I think it's really important for us to be able to give some direction to staff and for us to have a sense of what are we prioritizing by the end of this conversation. So having said that, we will start. And folks, please, I do ask for you to be judicious because we want to get to some of the processes and agreements as well. Call, and then that's it. Call.
Sorry about that. Really quickly, one thing I wanted to point out is that some of these items are in committees currently. And so committee chairs can probably help with limiting impact on staff as they go through their work. It's something that I'll talk to staff about for governance committee. We have a meeting coming up and hopefully I can get some information for that meeting on that front. In terms of some of the ones that seem a little bit more equally divided, on the forum topics issue, I have no problem with the concept of thinking about how we might change forum topics going forward. I would say that, and I know that some members have held off on submitting forum topics over the last several months. I would say that, forum topics are the only venue that board members have for raising an issue with the full board that hasn't been placed on an agenda by a consent of the full board. And so regardless of what we do going forward, I hope that we can keep that in mind as we think about what the future of forum topics might be. So if you've got some issue that, that you're struggling to build support for or that is not getting a hearing, be mindful that forum topics are the place that you're able to take those things. And I agree with what Megan said, that it's on the author of the forum topic or the authors of the forum topic to make their case for the importance of the topic, but it's also on all of us if we think that we should be limiting the time that or workload of staff, and we should be asking those questions as these things are presented. So that's my 2 cents on it. I think there's a lot of agreement in a lot of places, and that's very surprising to me. So I'm very happy. So I would just leave it at that. And on the TJ front, I think I heard Dr. Anderson say that it's on there because we're being inclusive of everything that's on our plate, knowing that that's coming to us next week.
Correct, I did.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Carl. That's it. Okay, Rashna, go ahead, then Megan.
Just briefly on the forum topic one, I actually changed mine from postpone to revised. And I just would like to put a plug in for saying that I really do think, I agree with what Carl said, that that's kind of our only way to sort of bring things a little more individually and build support. And I do think it's important to have that avenue to bring things to the board. I would just really urge my colleagues to think about how can we revise the process to, one, have more, whether it's a checkbox. I think Ms. Keith Kamara mentioned this, and I apologize if I'm getting the wrong person, on the form saying, have you checked with staff? Or maybe even play additional spots to talk about what's, staff workload, or how does this fit with our strategic plan, or some of these pieces. I think it would make it more helpful for the rest of us to really have an idea of how this fits, whether it's, or even the idea, I think, about having it as a list as we do our audit plan. I would really advise us to look at, let's use this as an opportunity when our staff is overloaded, and frankly, we are overloaded, to really delve into that process before we continue bringing things to the board. I just think it's a process that it has really good intentions, but needs some more meat around it to help inform that work. So I just encourage you to really think about, can we revise that work approach before going into the race of forum topics, right? The faster we bring them, the more it is. Staff is kind of whiplashing from topic to topic. And I think there's better ways we can do that work.
Thank you. Megan, then Abrar.
Thank you. It's sort of toggling back and forth between the charts and getting our mics on. I guess the first thing I want to point out is where right now there doesn't look to be much support for the school year calendar 2021-22. People are saying, yeah, number 30, school year 21-22 calendar. It's saying revised work approach. And maybe that should have been part of the question phase of how do you revise that? But I mean, the school calendar is something that we take a lot of pride and community engagement on that. And it's an important part of our decision making. So I'm not sure what the R means, but I would hope people would look at more of that as a postponement. Still, it's absolutely necessary, but that's really important board work, is our school calendar, and it worries me to see that being revised.
Again, you sound like as if you're in a bit of a tunnel. Can you repeat the last couple of statements, please?
Oh, that's strange. I haven't moved. So I'm just trying to understand what happens with the school year calendar. Everybody, that right now there's a majority are revise the work approach, and in my 9 years on the board, I don't know how you revise the school year calendar decision that we do. So
I can offer a little bit of a suggestion in terms of what's been tossed around. One of the things that we did this year in order to take the weight off of the work session, the work session seemed to be our most, I'm sorry, let me put my camera on. The work session seemed to be our most overloaded set of meetings. And you and I have had this conversation regarding how some of our business meetings are not as heavy. I think the word was like, some of them are pretty light and kind of fluffy. So how can we move some of the work, maybe from the work sessions to the business meetings. One example of what we did this year on that is the ERFC. We moved that from a work session to the presentation at the meeting. And I think we had very few questions that were asked. This calendar is scheduled, well, the request was for it to be scheduled at a work session. And that's where we tend to not have a lot of time. And so one of the considerations that I know Stella and I are thinking about is, do we bring this discussion, which we need to have because the calendar is important, we bring the discussion into a business meeting? Do we have some things that we discuss or get reports of ahead of time so that we have a more refined discussion during that business meeting in lieu of a work session, which is hard to schedule given all of the other work sessions? So that's just what I wanted to offer for your consideration.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. The only other thing that gave me pause was looking at our end of the year committee reports. I do think that there are some committees that do great work, but they are not complicated in terms of board engagement and requiring a work session on those particular committees. So I do support where I'm seeing a lot of the R's, but I do think that especially the ones that are mandated by the state, I don't understand the revised work approach piece. We need to be hearing from them. And to what Karen Corbett Sanders said, I don't support staggering them necessarily throughout the year, because most of the time people begin the work at the beginning of a new school year. They have the whole school year to work through that issue. And so it kind of just creates a natural start and stop. So people move, people's kids graduate out. There's just, I think if we end up staggering when they do their work, when they report to the committee, I think we run the risk of it maybe being more complicated for committee consistency, people rolling on and off, and the committee feeling like they've got a coherent group that's going to start on a charge and finish up their recommendations to the board. So that would be my concern there. And then other than that, I think that to Carl's point, it looks like there's a lot of consensus for a large number of these issues of where we are. So those are just key things I wanted to share.
Thank you. Abrar, and then Karen Pease.
Yeah, thanks. Forgive me if some of these emerge as questions based on my advocacy. I want to first point out the committee reports for this year. I'm just concerned about, what that does in our community. I mean, these are, groups that have been expecting to present since June, and they've been, postponed. Now we've listened to some in person. We're going to just all of a sudden pull it under the rug and say, hey, just submit a report. I find a big problem with that. If we're going to decide maybe the end of year reports moving forward, that's a separate conversation. But for those four in particular, I just really urge us to reconsider, given how we've already heard from the rest of them in person, and what message that sends to our members of the committee, who honestly, there's already kind of a feeling of, do they even listen to us, let alone. And I would suggest that we can have a meeting. I would, my advocacy would be to make it an R, perhaps, if you did make it a P, or to consider just keeping it if you put an R, with the suggestion that those are meetings we don't necessarily have to have everyone in. All it requires is a quorum. And so if we do it similarly, in a similar way to the public hearings we had done before, earlier this year, it could work out if we consider that. The second piece is regarding some of these topics that have already been approved in forum, which I imagine staff may have started some work on, related, for example, IB in elementary, middle school start times, the student town hall. I wonder if those pieces we might be able to gather consensus regarding our positions without necessarily having to have an entire work session. So, for example, while something like IB in elementary and middle school, or middle school start times, could be a conversation that is protracted and we end up having a back and forth. At the end of the day, it's, are we in favor or are we not? And so perhaps we can make an alternate decision here rather than eliminating or postponing, to keep it, but revise our method so that we select the consensus. Maybe we do a quick vote or something in public.
I'm so sorry, 1 second. Abra, 1 second. Tammy, could you turn off your microphone for just a bit?
Sorry.
Thank you.
I am sorry. I did that by mistake.
Okay, could you still hear me or understand what I was saying?
You should probably repeat the last piece. It was, the wind really got it.
Okay, I was saying regarding something like IB in elementary, middle school, or middle school start times, right? And the student town hall piece was already approved, so that might be more of a question. I'm confused about how we backtrack from that if it's already been put on the agenda. But for something like IB elementary school, middle school start time, right? That's something we may be able to revise rather than postpone or eliminate. And I say this because it's one of those things where, yes, we can have an extended conversation about what the details are and how it's going to be implemented, but ultimately it's more of a board vote, right? Like, are we in favor of starting the day later and directing, having staff just, implement that for the next school year or not? And understanding the work that's going to require, but rather than having, a work session or a time when we really hash out something that's more of a logistical operations concern. So I would just urge us to revise, to at least put revise on those rather than, yeah.
Just to answer to one piece of your question, the town hall, while we had the forum and the board moved it forward, it has not been scheduled for a work session. Most of the forum approved topics that required or was requested to have a work session have not been scheduled because there's just hasn't been any opportunity to do so given this year's workload. And that's essentially from January all the way up until very recently.
Okay, no, thanks for that clarification. Because that was put the first meeting we ever had together. But anyway, but for these topics, guys, really, I think we can put an R or a K if you want to do the K. But the reason again is we can approve, we can have these move forward and get a report about how it goes, as opposed to, I just don't see what we get out of a work session on any of these topics. We may get some, but it's marginal compared to what that would take away from a resources perspective, rather than postponing indefinitely or eliminating them. And the final thing I'll say regarding the great schools piece, the reason that, okay, well, that's my time.
No, keep going.
I was just going to say, I felt strongly about this only because I'd ask us to consider that a lot of our problems stem from this in the community perception, whether it's AP, boundaries, school, whether our schools are good or not. A lot of the, misperception about what we're doing is related to that. So I think we might as well, nip it in the bud. But in any case, that's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Karen, and then Laura Jane.
Yes, thank you. One, I just wanted to clarify.
Oh, I'm sorry, wrong Karen. The other Karen.
Sorry.
Karen Key.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were talking to me or not. I really just want to hopefully encourage folks. I know we've been through a really, really busy time. It is unprecedented. I think even for some folks who have been for all of us who have been on the board. But I want to say as we go forward, we're going to have a little more help. We're about to get our staff members. And so a staff, one full staff person. So I'm anticipating that will be helpful. I say this because I am very, very concerned about the desire to kind of trim things down, but I would like for us to protect board discussion. It is the very core of what we do, in my opinion. And there may, as a suggestion, there may be some room perhaps to discuss moving something, and I think you said this, or someone said, actually having part of the board meeting that is marked work session so that the community understands that it's going to be a little different, right? Because I am very concerned about not having sufficient time to discuss topics, having 3 minutes and then maybe a 1 minute or 90-second go back, which is essentially just a bit more than the citizens who come to speak at our board meetings. So I wanted to hopefully encourage us that I know we've all been through a lot and carrying a lot, but I think it's going to get better. With respect to the committees, I will say as the new liaison for HRAC, I've been to 2 meetings, and in each of those meetings, they have expressed frustration with not being able to bring forth their report. So this is part of the reason that I was raising the concerns with John Foster earlier. So I would advocate for a way for people who have been working really, really hard to at least feel as though we're listening. And then the last thing I would add, since I didn't hear the bell, I would love to continue the discussion with respect to how we might be able to slim down some of the discussions for work session as well as forum topics. But I think we can do it, and I think that it will also continue to build the kind of discussions we were having on our retreat and spending time together and getting to know how we all think.
Thank you, Karen. Laura Jane, then Tammy. I think we lost Tammy. So if Tammy doesn't come back in time, we'll go to you, Karen Corbett, and then we'll go back to her when she returns.
Great, thank you. I just wanted to...
A bunch of people get kicked off again?
No, I think I think Karen heard you call her name, and I heard you call my name at the same time.
No, I'm sorry. Let me backtrack. It's Laura Jane, and then Tammy. And if Tammy doesn't come back, then we're going to go to Karen.
Yeah, I think I got kicked off again just a few minutes ago. So I think we're all having some trouble tonight. It seems to have been all day today. I just had a couple of questions, or I guess advocacy. One is just the calendar. I think, Megan made a really good point, and my proposal was that there might be a way to get around using Melanie's experience on the calendar committee last year, developing it. There might be a way for us to see what already had been proposed, and be able to get feedback about how those suggestions were made, and maybe do one of our doodle polls to try to get us to some consensus, and then do, I think, exactly the process that Megan talked about, how we do surveys. I think outreach to the community is incredibly, incredibly important. I don't want a vote to postpone or do that as a different format to in any way impact our public comment on the calendar. And I know that's not what was intended, but I just want people to be feel comforted by that. The other is, I know that we're really close. I haven't seen the latest refresh, but on the boundary consultant report, and I just feel like I need to advocate from the FPAC perspective in representing them, that this was the old board who, did a work session, several work sessions, and an RFP was sent to make sure that we got best practices in the country about how do other boards determine how boundaries work, how often they're done, what leads their guidance. So I just wanted to remind I'm sure nobody needs a reminder about boundaries, but just remind folks that this is about the policy and how boards work together to bring a best policy, not about actually rebounding anything. So I think that we cannot ever have a conversation about what boundaries look like if we don't ultimately come up with a policy about what makes that happen. And so I would just strongly ask my colleagues to just let us be able to hear from the consultant. I totally support postponing action until we are out of this mess. But I do just want to, I'm just hoping folks will hold tight to their vote to keep it, because I think it's just so important for us to hear what other places are doing and come up with a policy, whether we're able to act on it or not, given the, everything that's happening in the world. That's it for me.
Thank you, Laura Jane. Tammy is not back with us, so Karen, we will go to you.
And
then
it's
Melanie.
Providence. It is Providence. Tammy just joined.
Go ahead,
Tammy?
Karen. I'll follow. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm
Okay.
just rejoining.
No problem. Okay, I'm glad to follow Laura Jane on the boundary study. I do, as she correctly stated, this is something that has been ongoing from the previous board, and it's really just to get the study results presented to this board, which should help us frame some other discussions going forward, but it's not initiating other discussions. And I think that we should go ahead and do that, because I have heard from constituents that they want to see what that study says. Secondly, I do want to just clarify the conversation and why I suggested on the committee reports that we give the committees a bit more time to do their work and to do 2-year appointments is because we got a reading under the last board about what happens if somebody gets replaced, a school board member turns over. And that reading allowed for the replacement of advisory committee members if there is turnover. And I know that many of the new board members did replace school board appointees during their when they came on board. So I don't think that that should be an impediment to rethinking about perhaps allowing our advisory committees to dig in deeper on subjects and have more time to do it, and staggering that presentation. I do agree though with what Karen suggested, that there are a number of committees that are still waiting to present from last year, and we do need to give them the respect of asking them to provide their feedback and their insights for this year. But when I put an R on committee reports, it was really looking towards the future.
Thank you, Karen. Tammy?
Yes, mine is more process oriented. Colleagues, as you know, I was unable to attend on Saturday, so I filled this out quickly, and I know I did speak to Riccardi directly about the need to potentially change. But now you said something, Riccardi, that we're going to go with this tally, and then that's kind of where we're going to be. So I just really want to understand process now. And there's several that I can see that are kind of, well, it seems like some people are changing theirs, but there were several that were kind of 6-6. So how do we work that, I guess? So that's my question right now regarding process and when can this be redefined or relooked at? I don't understand the time frame.
Sure. As I shared earlier, I think it's important for us to give whatever feedback and direction that we can to the staff as quickly as possible. And once I have the chance to, after everybody finalizes what they're doing, once we have the chance to see where it falls, we definitely may have to come back if we have some that are 6-6. But that will be what we use the break for, to determine which ones need additional conversation. And like I also shared earlier, there are some of these, even if the decision is an R or P, there has to be some additional conversations, whether it's in chairs and then with the board. How is this going to look moving forward? So this is not a one and done, but it's definitely going to give us a sense of where we're heading. Is that helpful?
Yes, that was helpful. So, but I get that, and since I guess we're talking in the short term here of well, who knows what term it is when we're talking about when we're in this kind of, so we have more time for return to school work, depending on how we have to dial up or dial down or do whatever we need to do as long as we're in this COVID crisis. I still feel like I need an opportunity, or I need a more definitive. So if there's some here, like, when are we going to revisit this? Like, if we're like, say it, we all agreed on some, for example, we're all like, okay, well, we really feel like that didn't need to happen. And, you know, how are we going to be able to say, well, you know, like for me, I still feel, you know, the strategic plan thing, I still see, you know, I'm the only one there that says, you know, keep that right now. And so my understanding is this is just going to be like, it's just going to be in a Bray Brand brief or something. Is that the way it's going to work right now?
Well, that one could be, and again, depending on how this lands, we have a lot of Ps, so it could just be postponing the exact way it's typically delivered to a later period, you know, towards the spring a little bit. Or if the R's end up what happens, then what does that look like? Is it a report that is provided to us in writing for us to follow up with questions at another component, at another time? Or is it a report that is provided to us during the regular business meeting and we ask our questions there? It's just, the R would mean it would not typically look like it has before, which is presentation at the business meeting, then the work session, all four parts, because each of these typically stand alone. And Marty, can I invite you to kind of speak to the typical and the more traditional, I'm sorry, let me put my camera back on. If Mr. Smith, if you could speak to the traditional overview of this for us, because my understanding is such that it's one, but I want to be sure that you can speak to it from the expert in this.
And I apologize, I was texting just briefly. Could I get the topic once again?
It is the GO report.
It's the
Tammy
GO
had
report,
asked.
Marty.
Yes. So the goal reports, we created the goal reports to provide information to the board about our progress regarding the full goal areas. In the past, we have, each department has created the goal report and has presented that report. This year, because of the pandemic, we gave that responsibility to the Office of Research and Strategic Improvement. So they gathered the data, they worked with the departments and developed 4 comprehensive goal reports with analysis. They then asked the departments to provide staff responses for the work. So we have goal report staff responses, we'll have executive summaries that will provide a lot of good information for the board as a basis moving forward for the budget process and any other policy decisions around this work. We know that we were in the process in March of taking another look at our strategic plan. The pandemic hit us and we pulled back on some of that work. So I think that this will give the board an opportunity to take a look back on the work that we've done, be able to ask us good questions as part of the budget development process, and then think about where they want to go with priorities in the future.
Okay, thank you. I don't have anything else right now.
Thank you. And I think, oh, I'm sorry, Melanie, please go ahead.
Thank you. You know, I like that we're really looking at trying to make a data-informed approach, because I know a lot of us use those terms. So, you know, we're creating the data, but I think it's still really valid. And I'm really eager to hone in and cut down on some of the
Hold on one second, Melanie. Hold on one second. Tammy, if you can turn off your microphone, please.
Yes, ma'am. I'm toggling between the two. I'm sorry. It just takes a while.
It's okay. It's just the wind. It's a little hard. Melanie, please start again.
Thanks, Tammy. No, I'm glad that we're using, you know, data to inform our decision making, even if it's data of our own creating, because I think we do need to hone in and prioritize. And when we look at some of the other discussion items that came out of the retreat, the other chart, I mean, about discussion rules and time management, these themes of prioritize, decrease the work, don't stretch everyone so thin. And, while like Karen Keys-Gamara, I'm excited to have a staff eventually, I think that we also need to remember all the other things that we do that are not part of this chart, the constituent work, the advisory committee work, our closed sessions, and student discipline. So, I'm really not interested in trying to keep as much on this as possible. I mean, return to school needs to be our first priority and whatever else we're legally obligated to. And so I really just want to say, I hope that we're really looking at this at what we can pare down, and we'll figure out what postpone means, because we just don't know with COVID. And I do agree that the forum process, it needs to be revamped. I agree that there just seem to be extremes. It's like on one side is a forum topic to push forward things that could almost be like rubber stamps that just will allow staff to continue their work with our approval. And then others are like really big ideas. And so I wouldn't want to treat those the same. I think that we need to just revisit whether that's updating the governance manual, John Foster helps us, or Eileen is the clerk. I think we need to update that. Regarding the committee reports, committee work, I know it was mentioned that some of our advisory committees haven't had the opportunity to present, which is unfortunate. Response to that is COVID happened. And, we just couldn't predict how much time we'd have available. Also, we know that our committees do want to work in a more authentic way. And this goes back to doing that public engagement committee work. And perhaps there's some marrying of people who want to somehow work on public engagement committee, advisory committee revamp work with committee reporting work and timelines, for that. I think there's a nexus there. And then finally, I just really would like to hear from Marty, Mr. Smith, about, we've got some big ticket items on here, so to speak, some big projects, and then we've got smaller ones. And I just would really like to hear, what's your estimate of the biggest ticket things here? What would you even suggest as the order of some of these items? You might not be able to answer them tonight, and you just received this email, this chart today. But I'm not understanding how can we understand how to make compromises on what to put forth. I'd really love to hear your input on that. Thank you.
So when you think about some of the big ticket items, of course, I spoke earlier about the budget. I speak about the CIP process. Those are processes that are cross-departmental and have a huge impact on staff time. And when you think about some of the additions that we've done to the budget process this year, we're taking a look at the program budget. Again, that's an additional load on staff time. I also think that, as we think about the work and think about what it is that the board wants to focus on, it really is tied to your priorities. I want to take a minute to talk about the budget. So this year we've engaged multiple departments to talk about the program budget. We're going to be bringing that work forward to the school board in 6 to 7 meetings during the course of the year. It's taken quite a bit of staff time to do that alone this year, on top of the work that we're experiencing with the pandemic. I had a meeting with my staff last week and all of my assistant superintendents and directors, and we talked about workload, and I've got 3 pages of documents of things that we're currently working on. Much of that is pandemic related, and a lot of it is just regular work that we have to do. So I think that I'd like to have that opportunity to go back and talk with the teams a bit more about some of the items on this list and really talk about workload. It is an issue for us not only in the classroom with our teachers, with our principals, it is an issue for us in central office. And so as we're preparing documents and work for the board, which is very important work for the board as we think about setting policy, we also have to consider the impact that it has on the folks who are pulling all of that work together and ensuring that the trains keep running in Fairfax County.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. I will now take a quick turn. I want to say that, all of this work is really important because if it wasn't, it would never make it onto here. But we are living in a different time where we do have to prioritize. And I'm glad that I got a chance to follow Marty, because all of this work is in addition to just keeping the system going in a very, very different way. I've had to actually vote against some things that I very deeply believe in because I believe the time does not allow us to do it justice because there's just no more space. There's no more bandwidth. Grade schools and middle school start times are very important to me, part of my platform in running. But I do think in this space, that we will have the grace to postpone those for another time. It's not, we'll never pick them up. It's just that we can't pick them up during this calendar year because the same people are juggling too many balls. And so I also think we'll get the same grace from the committees that we're not able to get to. Do we need to do the ones that are mandated? Absolutely. But I think with the rest for this year, we can think about doing it differently. There might be some things here that as we revise them, we decide that that's a better way of doing business. But for the postponement, it's just, we're going to keep it the same way, just at a different time where there's a little bit more bandwidth for people to do the work without feeling entirely burnt out. And so that's what I wanted to share here. I want to be sure that we're not losing track of, there's still a significant workload. And all of it is important. We're just prioritizing a little bit differently this year during COVID. Okay. So since the last speaker, it is exactly 5:50. We will have 5 minutes of people finalizing whatever it is that they want to do here. And then we will take a break and we will come back together, let's say 6:15, so we can continue with the second half of this agenda. Thank you, folks.
Madam Chair, are you still there?
I am. I just told them up my camera so I could finish my tally.
Just a quick question for you. Do people know that your second spreadsheet, the follow-up for suggested and discussion, et cetera, that there are multiple tabs on that spreadsheet so people can chime in on time management, use of task force, et cetera?
People may not yet be aware, but it is something that I'm going to bring to people's attention when we open up that spreadsheet, because we will be going through hopefully no more than 3 of them. We're already at 6 o'clock, so It may be fewer than that, but we are going to prioritize depending on the votes that we receive regarding the conversation. Gotcha. So I will take people through those tabs. The ones that we're not able to do today, we will still find some time to do. It may have to be electronic. It may have to be a lot of calls because we don't have the luxury of this time the way that we do today. But I do want to take my opportunity to go finalize my worksheet. So I am going to put my little tab here on away. I guess, I don't know, were you able to hear me? I am going to put my tab on away so I can do my tally, and then I will see you all at 6:15.
Madam Chair, I'm trying to understand. This is Megan. So
go ahead.
We were first working on everything we just did, and now you want us to go work on the second chart? Or
no, I do not.
Okay.
These 5 minutes is for you to finalize this chart. That's the only task. Finalize this chart, take a break. I'm going to finalize my ratings and then do some tallying, and then we will come back. And then we will have the second part. But you only have one task for the next 5 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. All right, folks, I'm away. Hello, everyone. Hello. Anybody out there?
Hello.
Sorry, I was so busy tabulating, I completely lost track of time. And as you can see, I'm not yet finished tabulating, so we will come back to that hopefully by the end of this evening. One of the things that I do want to say is from what I've seen so far, abstentions don't count, so it doesn't count against or for. So whatever the majority is, that's where we went. There are several that you will see that will require follow-up. And by the way, I did close down the permissions for the form because I had a hard time following as things were jumping. I'd like to think everybody concluded their work. And so right now, everybody only has viewer access rather than editor access. So there are going to be a number of items that we will need to follow up on at some other time. And obviously, because I need to move on to the next item, we will continue tallying this, but everybody could count and kind of see where we are. There will be some calendaring impacts. So hopefully Dr. Brabrand, Stella, and Ms. Mulberg will be bringing these items to chairs tomorrow. I will try to continue working on this evening so that we can tackle as many as we possibly can. And I think those are the main things that I wanted to say. Obviously, this work is not finished. So I will, okay. Thank you, Abrar. So I just wanted to at least share that. Let's do a quick roll call to make sure we have everybody back with us. I just jumped into some explanations. So I apologize for that. Abrar, are you with us?
I'm here. I'm here.
Elaine?
I'm here.
Karen Keys-Gamarra?
I'm here.
Karen Corbett-Sanders?
I'm here.
Carl?
Here.
Laura Jane?
Here.
Melanie?
Here.
Rashna?
I'm here.
Stella?
Hi, I'm here.
Tammy?
Here.
Super. Megan?
Here.
And I am here. I hope everybody had a chance to hear what I shared earlier regarding completing this sheet. I was still tallying, which is why I was a couple of minutes returning back into this conversation. So I apologize for that. It is 6:19. We're going to jump into the second piece, which is hopefully to tackle one or two of the multiple processes and agreements that we wanted to talk about. And in keeping with Saturday's conversation and prioritizing and also in being respectful of people's time, I'm hoping to keep us to the 7 o'clock hour unless the majority of the board would like to continue. But that is going to be what we do at about 6:55, because I think it's important for us to start putting into action some of the things that we've been discussing. So give me please a couple of minutes to toggle back and forth to another document. I sent an email to everyone probably around 3:30-ish or so, and it had the link to the retreat follow-up processes and agreements. If you do not have that link at this time, please raise your hands and I will ask if Stella or anyone can please add it to the chat. Megan, do you not have the link? Okay, so everybody has the link. Thank you so much, Carl. Thank you so much, Abrar, for getting that up really quickly. Just a little bit of orientation to that link. It has several tabs at the bottom. We have not had the chance to add all 10 items, only because we've been working on this fast and furious since it was received last night. So we did prioritize to the 3 issues, and there are a couple more because it's a work in progress. We did prioritize the discussion for this evening to the 3 issues on which the majority of the school board members wanted to have further discussion. As you will see from that second email that I sent after 3:30, Discussion rules had a majority of 8 people who wanted to discuss it, as well as time management and the use of task forces. So those are the ones that are prioritized for us to address this evening. If you take a look at the tab, the link that I shared with you, at the bottom, there are several tabs. The first one is discussion rules, second one is time management, and the third one is use of task force, to pretty much align with the ones that appear to be the most important to our board. So I want to give you a minute to orient yourself to those 3 tabs. Megan, do you have a question?
Just sort of a question and maybe a suggestion. So my concern with this is you mentioned that depending on our timing, we just go to a survey and filling this out. And it really, I think the survey can work as a tool we used as the budget, where it's to get an initial pulse. But I'm uncomfortable where we're going to be working together as a board, and the goal was to get more of a consensus view on how we do our work, to just say, well, whoever the survey was done, you've got 4 veterans who might be able to speak to our experiences on why things have been done the way they've been done, or maybe suggestions to improve on what we've been doing. And the idea that the only way that this is going to get done is either through a survey, or which board members choose to talk to each other about it before the tallies are collected. I would like to suggest again that the survey be used to see where there's the consensus, and where there's not, that we would at least then bring this back for board discussion. It doesn't have to be for this evening, but how we do our work is critically important to then doing good work.
Absolutely. And my thinking is the 3 items that had the majority of board member responses to have the discussion, those will be prioritized to have discussions. We are not going to be able to have discussion on 10 items. So the 3 discussion rules, time management, and use of task force, we want to be sure that we have that. It may not all happen this evening. For the others, we're going to have to be really creative in terms of how we get to that consensus, because we cannot have a meeting on 10 different issues. We just don't have that luxury. So
yeah, no,
I just clarified that.
Yeah,
those 3 we will make time for.
I thought you were saying that if we run out tonight on these 3 areas that we've expressed a desire to talk about them, then what doesn't get done tonight gets done through survey only. You're saying it's just the others.
No, that's not what I meant to convey. So sorry if I wasn't clear.
That's okay. Thank you.
So since everybody has the document, and we are going to start with discussion rules. So I want to be sure that everybody has an opportunity to review what's been listed here. And again, very gracious to have the support of Melanie and Stella to try to synthesize these issues, because as you can see from the longer Word document that I provided, there were a lot of repetitive and duplicate statements. And so we tried to synthesize it, but we want to be sure that all of the viewpoints are still provided. So this one, there's not, I don't think, a whole lot of opportunity necessary for question asking about this, but we do want to have the opportunity for everybody to give some feedback and to give some of their thoughts. I am not sure what's happening on my screen right now. Is everybody seeing kind of a mess, or is it just me? Okay, here it is. So please take a look at the discussion rules suggestions that have been synthesized into this document, and also glance at the Word document to be sure that there was not anything that is missing that just didn't make it in the translation. So that's kind of the first task. Bashna, did you have a question?
Oh, sorry, I raised my hand back.
Oh, okay. So please take a look, and then we will just begin our discussion. And as we did before with the board priorities, go ahead and add your ranking. Well, not your ranking, because this one it's either yes or no. Just add your preferences whenever it is that you're ready to make that decision. And after the full close of everybody having an opportunity to speak, we will take 5 minutes to have everybody finalize their decisions. Okay. So let me start a new list of speakers, and we will start with Melanie and then Carl.
Oh, thank you. And I do want to say that I have to head to a PTA meeting at 7, so I'll be here as long as then. Yeah, so this was actually the sheet that, oh, are you there? The screen's all screwy.
Yeah, we're here.
Okay. So this was the list of things from the retreat that I helped to organize. And so, you know, looking at it now and seeing, so again, so we took all of the Post-its that we had put on each topical page and then, you know, put them in here and I tried to group them. Some were in there multiple times. So, but that will show in the voting how it goes, how people feel about it. I think that when I'm looking now at people trying to respond, you know, under length of time for speaking, I mean, it's clear that it's still kind of confusing or unknown about, you know, maintaining that 3-minute rule. Like that could be an area where perhaps we could deliberate a tiny bit in this space today. Seems like the most or the least, what's the word, commitment to things in this chart is around the time limits of speaking and the frequency of speaking so far. So that might be something that we each want to speak to. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Melanie. Carl and then Laura Jane.
I'm happy to follow Melanie because I know how much of a passion this subject has been for her and for others too, obviously. But just a couple things that I've been thinking through. One of my suggestions that up here, of course, is the longest one. So I apologize for that. But it's basically to get rid of the 3-minute time limit and the traditional go back and to give members more flexibility with how they use their time. So you would give them 5 or 6 minutes. The 6 is just kind of like what I threw on there on my Post-it. And then they could use that all in one sitting, or they could reserve the remainder of their time for a go back. The reason I came up with that idea is it's a little bit more similar to how they work in a legislature. But the thing that I notice most frequently is that people are truncated slightly at the end of their conversation with staff. And this would make it a little bit easier for them to get through what they need to get through. And then they could reserve that time for a go back. Conversely, if they only wanted to lead with their time, they'd be able to do that as well without a go back. So it gives them more flexibility and more control over what they're saying. And I think it would result in members feeling less like they've been a victim to a clock of some kind. The second thing I would say on the issue of staff speaking time, I don't think that we want to limit staff's response, but I do think we want to focus staff's response. And so part of that is not necessarily cutting them off at a certain time, but it is reminding them of how long they've been speaking for sure. So regardless of where we end up on that, I think we should be telling people, members of our staff, when they've reached the 3-minute mark, just like we get a buzzer, they would get a buzzer so that they know that they should be wrapping it up and getting closer to the point. Generally speaking, I'm also very supportive of making sure that staff focuses their presentations, but I will say that that requires all of us to do our due diligence to read the reports and presentations that are posted on board docs, hopefully more than 48 hours in advance, because otherwise we just have an uninformed conversation. That's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl. Tammy, I believe you were next, and then Laura Jane.
Sure, thank you. I would ask just if we could, I see there's a couple people that haven't filled this out, including myself, and just given how I'm attending this meeting, I am not going to be able to fill it out because I can't do it tonight. So I would ask my colleagues if we could have the grace to do it tomorrow, unless that is really something you feel like can't be done. Ricardi, I would ask you that right now.
No, I don't think so. So long as we make sure that it is done and we just adhere to whatever these results are. We do want to be sure because of the way that some of these suggestions were provided. Some are like competing against each other a little bit because they're slightly different.
Right.
So let's just be mindful of that slight confusion.
Okay, so I appreciate that. And so I will complete mine tomorrow, but I do want to state my advocacy for my colleagues. This has been a big point of frustration for me because I consistently feel like we are cutting each other off. We do not have the 3-minute rule was designed basically because the length of sometimes people were going well over, but at this point I feel that there needs to, given the fact that we have this pandemic, that there's historical data that presented. I don't know if I'm ready to sign on to Carl's suggestion, but I would.
Tammy, you're breaking up a little bit.
A elongated amount of time.
Tammy, you're breaking up a lot. Tammy, do you want to reconnect and then we'll come back to you?
Yes.
Okay, we'll come back to you. Laura Jane, go ahead.
Thanks. I just had a few questions. One, I guess I have a lot of question marks actually. A couple of them just involve like how this is going to work. So I like Carl's idea, as he said, it's really commonly used in the legislature where folks get, time that they can cede back, and they even concede it to their colleagues, which, sometimes when this is an issue that's of particular passion for one, I can see how that would work, but I'm all about function. So how would this work? Like, is poor Eileen going to be tasked with trying to remember who has 1 minute and 36 seconds left for like 12 of us? And then at the end, like each time someone speaks, then she's going to remind them how much time they have left?
I would imagine it would look something like that.
So typically in boards and such where this is used, there's a sheet of paper that has each person's name that's used for each round of debate. And as the person finishes and they say something along the lines of, I yield my time to the chair, which means I give it all up, or I reserve my time for, in our case, a go back. And then the clerk next to that person's name would write 1 minute and 35 seconds. And when they come around for their go back, they get recognized and the clerk would say 1 minute and 35 seconds.
Okay.
It sounds more complicated than it actually is in process.
Yeah, I was just trying to be cognizant of like how much, nonsense Eileen can put up with. So I'm very, so I really like this idea. I wish that there were an easier way to do this, but that said, like I'm not opposed to it. And I think what Ricky said in the beginning, or maybe no, Carl, what you said in the beginning about asking staff to adhere to the 3-minute rule. I think I like the idea that it gives them just some framework, because I think especially some folks are just so super wonky smart in one area that they don't even realize that it's been going on 3 minutes. And I love it and I appreciate it, but I know that sometimes the answers get a bit long, not intentionally. I'm sure they'd be happy to speak less. So I will support that. I just got worried that it was like we were going to cut them off at 3 minutes, but I think a time reminder seems reasonable. And then I guess, for me, I kind of used question marks, and maybe Ricky, I appreciate that you called it like an abstain in the other, because some I just don't have that much feeling one way or the other. But I'll try to look when everyone's done, because if my not having an opinion about it is like screwing it up for the group, I'd be happy to look. And the one thing I would just comment, if you don't scroll all the way to the bottom, you don't see that number 43 is just asking if there's like sort of any other kind of suggestions. Well, it may not be asking, but it put another suggestion that was there. And so I just see like there's 3 of us who have asked about some sort of break protocol, like even if it's every couple hours, it's a 5 minutes or something. So I just wanted to put people's attention to that because I did not initially see it when scrolling through. That's all I have.
Thank you. And I will try to clean that up a little bit so that we can better respond to it, because the way that it is currently listed, it's a little hard to read and to understand. Tammy, were you able to come back?
I'm back. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I was expressing that I think this has been frustrating because I feel there's been so many topics and we have not been able to have the dialogue that is so important in the core center of board members where you're actually dialoguing together, and the 3-minute rule very much limits us. I would, as I look over the document, I would prefer at this point to have the opportunity to, it would depend on a topic. The time limits could vary by topic, but then we would have standardization in each. Like if it was, I'm just going to use just letters. Topic A is so very, very important that we should not have time limits. But topics B, C, and D are, kind of standard protocol things, and we could adhere to whatever, it is, 3 minutes, 2 minutes. I do worry, I appreciate Carl's suggestion very much. I do worry about that and the ability of our clerks to keep that time. And it sounds a bit complicated because staffs are much bigger at congressional levels, where there's people being able to do that. And the one thing that really I think and I would have mentioned this at the retreat, the other retreat, one thing that was very, very frustrating was meeting managers making up on the fly. Okay, you'll have X amount of seconds. That should not happen, and we must adhere to clear points, whatever they are when we are. But I would err on having almost a 2-tiered, available by topic, depending on an unlimited time, up to, say, a certain amount of time. We can say up to 7, 8 minutes, whatever that is, whatever's reasonable, and then have, for other topics, then have options there available, which are standardized, no matter if it's 3 to 5 minutes, and go backs or 2, or go backs or 1, but it's understood, and meeting managers don't have just a laissez-faire kind of we're going to do 60 seconds today. That does not work.
Tammy, if you want to, since you did not have an opportunity to contribute to this at all, if you wanted to send me a text of a statement that you'd like to have included here, and I'll try to embed it where it makes sense. Something pretty succinct so that we can add it here for people to respond to. Okay. If you don't see that it's already been listed.
Yeah, it's kind of a hybrid of 2 of these things. Yeah. Okay, I will do that.
Okay, thank you. Abrar, and then Dr. Braybrand.
I think his hand was up for like 2 speakers. Maybe.
Scott, did you have something you wanted to share? Let's then start there.
Just real quick, just a thought, and it may not be a good one, but I want Carl's idea with a twist. One thing to think about is having a portion of your discussion, because the board I hear talks about wanting dialogue with each other. Part of your time is asking staff questions. I think maybe different rules and functions for both of those things that board members want to do. I would ask you to consider dividing, and again, this is just listening real time on the fly. Create time for staff questions. That's the first thing. one board member, one question, and you go around and around until questions are over or the board determines that's enough questions for the topic. Then a separate part two, is board member conversation with each other. I think that may be a way, in whatever time limit or no time limits on that, that allows staff to get to sit back and actually listen and watch the board deliberate. I think you're trying to mix both of those. It gets complicated. It gets frustrated. Board members sometimes are trying to get their questions in 3 minutes. Staff is overwhelmed trying to remember them all. They ramble, and I'm one of them who does. One question, one board member goes around once or twice. Then it goes over to board conversation. Different rules for each of those key functions might be a better way to have more productive discussions for the board. Just an idea.
Thank you, Scott. That kind of mirrors what we did in the first half of this conversation, where we just had questions and then we had opportunity to just offer a commentary. So thank you for that nugget. Abrar and then Karen Corbett-Sanders.
Yeah, thanks. I can definitely support something to that effect. I was going to say maybe if appropriate, I would move, but I know we're not having that kind of meeting, to actually just take Carl's suggestion and delve deeper into it to refine it. A couple of things. I definitely like not having a time limit, not because I think we should talk forever, but there are a lot of reasons, honestly, and it's one of those things where it causes a lot of anxiety to try to fit into its time limit. And I think, at least I'll speak for myself, I think I'd be more coherent if I had the opportunity to just talk. So that's, I definitely support that. I did want to say that it might be worthwhile to also consider the topic. So let's say, if it's, I don't know, return to school, maybe we set the upper limit at 10 minutes or something. But that's obviously for conversation as to how that looks like. Whereas maybe with like the legislative agenda, it's more appropriate to, I don't know, have like 4 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever, as an upper limit. Another point I was going to make was, I don't know that any of our suggestions have necessarily addressed the challenge that comes with interrupting the flow of ideas. So sometimes, there will be a line of questions that's related, and then it's not until 5 board members later that someone's like, I want to go back to the point X person made. So I wonder if we can address that somehow, although I understand it might require a less formal structure. So I just wanted to put that out for folks' thoughts. But I actually do like the idea of just one question at a time going around until questions are finished, and may help us have more discretion and also pay attention to one another, because it's very hard, when you're like 2 hours later and you're trying to remember whether, 2 hours ago someone had asked or meant the same thing you meant. But anyway, those are just some thoughts. So perhaps my suggestion would be to take if we can gather consensus around Carl's recommendation and delve deeper into refining and adding components to it.
Thank you, Abrar. Karen, and then Rashna.
Yes, thank you. So this is a really important topic, and I'm kind of worried that we're rushing through it, because a big part of our discussion rules is linked to the level of detail that is, and the timeliness in which reports and topics are shared with the board prior to getting to the board table. And so I would suggest that goes hand in hand with making sure that we receive reports and thorough reports in a timely manner, so that the board can actually reflect, individual board members can reflect on what they receive, and perhaps even do some advanced conversations with staff members to better understand a topic, or with each other, so that we can spend more time deliberating on individual topics, rather than spending the time asking for clarity and probing into it. So that's my first statement on this, or first concern, that we really need to make sure that the quality and
and level of data and analysis is there in advance of the meetings. Then with that, then I think it will make it easier for us to adhere to the concept of having, you know, an initial statement by board members, and I don't know what the length is it 3 minutes or 6 minutes? And then follow up, which is frankly more, I would like to see more dialoguing and deliberation between board members.
Thank you. Rachna and then Megan.
Thank you. I appreciate that. A couple of pieces. One, I had trouble, to be honest, filling this form out because so many of the, I liked many of the options, and so ranking would have been helpful, I think. And I don't want to, I'm not trying to say that in any negative, because I know how hard you and Stella and Melanie have worked on this. I'm just saying that a ranking would be, you know, like this would be my top, my second, my third. Having said that, I actually really like Scott's recommendation of going round and round and asking questions, and I agree with Abrar, it helped us listen to each other. So I had a couple of pieces on that. I do wonder, like, if we're asking staff a question each and going to the next person, if there's a follow-up or clarification. I find sometimes that I find either my question wasn't really answered or maybe there was misunderstanding, how that would work. Or if there's a follow-up question to staff that we could ask directly. I find sometimes when I have 3 minutes and I'm talking to staff, they answer a question and I have something to add after they've said it. So I don't know how that would work, but I really do like the idea of kind of going round and round. I would think that we'd need to clarify a number of rounds, and that might change based on the topic, or a time limit on that, you know, overall, not each person. And then I also would love to find some ways for back and forth with board members. I know we're talking about, you know, we can kind of each give our advocacy, but would there be a way to sort of, you know, similar to staff with follow-up? If somebody says something, we can respond, or I don't know how that would look. I just think that dialogue and sort of is helpful to me. But I guess if I was getting my advocacy on this, I do think we need some sort of time limits. It helps me to streamline what I'm trying to say. But I like the idea of going around to ask questions and separating that from our own advocacy piece of it. So I don't know if that's helpful or not.
Thank you. Megan? Oh, I'm so sorry. Hold on 1 second, Megan. Stella, I know you have to go at 7. Did you want to make any comments?
No, that was Melanie. I can speak at the end.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Megan, go ahead.
Okay, I'm happy to be following Rasha and Abrar. Ricky, I want to compliment you for earlier today. I did like the idea that we went with questions first, then discussion. So I think that's definitely something to be thinking about. I do also want to echo strongly what Karen Corbett Sanders said in terms of a lot of times board members are asking a tremendous number of questions, not simply because the PowerPoints alone without a report don't provide the data and the analysis we need, but also we run into the challenge of when does the information reach the board members. And as we know, and this is not that I think staff does this with any intentionality. I think everybody's overwhelmed, but we have had a lot of information coming to us very last minute, and we're being asked to talk about some really important issues. So I think that this notion of how many questions we ask, I also want to raise a point no one has said yet, which is when we get a 50 slide PowerPoint, and again, the PowerPoint doesn't even provide a lot of the data, then to say you get one question to ask, you know, it's when you have that dense of a PowerPoint, you might have 10 questions over 50 slides. So I think I'm not ready to commit right now and saying what I think will be better But I do think tonight was a great example of trying something new. I really do like the idea of breaking up our dialogue, because we don't dialogue enough. We just chew up all of our time with asking questions. I do want to share with my colleagues that having staff adhere to that 3-minute rule with the timer going off to just sort of say wrap up, just like we're asking ourselves. If you go back to our work sessions, you will see school board members take up about 30% of the time and staff take about 70% of the time. And that's just when I've added up when we get 3 minutes plus a go back and how much time we take up in a 4-hour work session. So I do hope people will recognize that it's not hard and fast. Of course, we want staff to give us comprehensive responses, but be mindful what chews that up. And then I do like what Carl is proposing, and I agree with what people said, that maybe that 6 minutes slides a bit based on the complexity of an issue in front of us, but that would be a good process for it. I do think we have, we have to think about time, the timekeeping, and how best to do that.
Thank you. Elaine?
Hi, yes, just a couple of comments. I think we are a little bit sensitive during this time of COVID. We've had a number of situations where, gotten the PowerPoints or presentations for a work session or board meetings, just hours before the meeting, and it's made it really hard to be prepared with questions. I have asked a number of leadership team members over the last, several weeks, like, is this how you've seen this working, for years? Is this a board thing, or is this part of, where everyone is just so overloaded with work? And I've gotten the immediate replies of, no, really, this is a bit unusual, which has given me some great relief. Because I think moving forward, I do see most members on this board really looking for data and background information on the topics that are at hand. So I'm hoping that, as other people have said, some of what we're dealing with right now could be alleviated if we had some of that background data and information as a subsequent or a separate report from the PowerPoint before the actual work session. And then that would allow us to have less questions. I do kind of like the idea of the roundtable for questions, because I do find sometimes with the big litany, long list of questions, it's hard to keep track, and then we end up repeating each other. I like the idea of maybe giving staff a little bit of a timer, but most of the time at those work sessions, I'm there to really hear from staff or whatever experts we've brought in for the day. So I don't want to limit the time that they have to give us explanations and talk to us about the topics at hand. And I also think that, one of the things we also wanted to talk about was just the role of the meeting manager. And maybe we need to rely a little bit more on our meeting managers to be creative and innovative in looking at some of the different techniques that we might use depending on the topic. And, part of it is timing. If it's, a very important or very detailed topic, we're going to need more time than on other topics. And so I think, that can be added to the role of the meeting manager. And I do just want to mention, I've got a PTA meeting in a few minutes, so I may be ducking out shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. I just want to acknowledge that in a little while, we are going to be losing at least 2 of our board members, which will make it very difficult to continue this conversation. It is 6:55. This was the portion at which I was going to ask for an extension. But again, we're losing a couple of folks. So I at least would like for everyone to have a first turn. If your hand is up, please lower it at this point. Or rather, let's try to be a little creative if we can. Where your picture is, and I want to give all credit to this to Laura Jane, where your picture is, where you have that green check mark, if you open that up, you'll see a number of statements: away, leave session, happy, sad, etc., agree or disagree. I think I'm going to ask you all to use the agree or disagree button for the next question. I am asking for permission to continue until at least every school board member has had a turn for this topic. So if you agree, just go ahead and select that. And I see that things are turning green. And we have Abrar, Elaine, Karen Corbett Sanders, Carl, Laura Jane, Megan, Rashna, and myself. We definitely have a majority that agrees to everyone having a turn. So thank you. Go, and I don't know how to take, oh, there's a clear button. So you could go ahead and clear it. It's right underneath. I didn't even see that. Laura Jane, thank you for this little tidbit. And also Carl, I think you reiterated that to me as well. So we will continue until everybody's had a turn. Stella, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm a little bit behind. I've got some feedback. How did you do that nice little green thing? Was it the 3 dots?
No. If you go to where your picture would be, there's a check mark.
Gotcha.
If you select that, you get an entire menu of things to respond to. This is how I did my I'm away when we went on the break earlier.
Okay, learning
Somebody
new
steps away to
things.
go to the restroom, then we'll know that they're not there. My daughter uses it all the time too.
Whew, I need her to give me a little lesson here, it seems. So I actually like the way we do our 3 minutes and then go around and look at where the time is. I really like that. And I will tell you, as somebody who just, this is just how I've always functioned since I was young. I am a listener. I like listening. So I tend to speak near the back end. But what that lets me see is how these discussions kind of progress. And the reality is that we as a board, we are repetitive at times. And I think that eats up time. So if we could somehow work maybe to just be a little bit better at that, at not asking the same questions, not making the same points. And then I think it would allow us the time that we want to have the extra go backs. I just see that as a particular issue for us as a whole. You know, the 6 minutes, respectfully, I'm not a fan of that. I can't imagine sitting and listening to somebody for 6 minutes and then trying to keep track of who's got what. I also think it may take away from the flow of the conversation. 6 minutes just a long, long time. And I don't think there's anything that takes away from us if we are in a particularly important topic or a topic we feel has not been, adequately discussed, just informally as a board saying, we need more time, we want more time, whether that means extending it in the current meeting or rescheduling it for a second session. Anyway, that's where I am. So I actually really like our structure. I just think we could be a little better at the way we handle our conversations.
Thank you. Ms. Keys-Gamarra, and then I will take my turn.
Yes, I'm happy to come behind Stella because I have less problems with that, but some of that may be, from my background. But I could do 3 minutes, I could do 6, I could do either and have a go back. I just want us to be able to benefit from each other's thinking. I think that's one of the most valuable things we are able to do. With respect to staff time, my focus on that would be the actual presentation. And I think it was Carl that said we should all be prepared. And if we are, then it's highly unlikely that we need to have a 45-minute presentation. So I don't think that this is on there, but I would just like to ask Dr. Brabrand if he thinks, as a rule of thumb, we could have staff presentations be about 30 minutes. Because I think we need to leave the bulk of the conversation to the questions you were talking about, as well as board deliberation.
Ms. Keys-Gamarra, I think that's absolutely an aspiration we want to get to. Yes, I admit that we're not there now, but I'd be glad to work with staff to get to having a 30-minute cap on our presentations and working toward doing that. That would give you all more of that dialogue time that I know you need. So yes, work on it. I can't deliver it probably. It may not be this Thursday's return to school presentation in 30 minutes or less, but we're going to work to try to do it. More of the presentations, and 30 minutes is a reasonable goal to shoot for.
Okay, so that would be my advocacy. With respect to questions and going round robin, I typically, I read the presentation and I write all my questions down. And there's some continuity to those questions. If I get this answer, then I ask this question. So that's the reason, Dr. Brabrand, I would have more difficulty with round robin, because I personally think, just based on how I gather the information, I would be frustrated to say I have one question and then I can't continue until we go through 11 other people.
Sure, and my idea of that is flexible, obviously. Maybe it's just a questioning round of time, and it's a minute of questions or however, or it's 4 questions a board member and then it goes on, and if you really need more than 4, it comes back around the second round, something like that. The nugget to me is board focus on hearing answers from staff, and then the board focus on the conversation that you talked about that board members need to have, and honestly, that we need to be able to listen. Because we're going back and forth trying to listen and try to answer questions, and those are 2 different skill sets. I think we might actually be better to serve you by knowing, okay, we're done being on the, I don't want to call it a hot seat, but we're done being asked to answer, and now we can focus on listening to what the conversation of the board is. So it may not have to be just one board member, one question, and next. Maybe it's just a pocket of time around which it's going to focus on questions from board members.
I would feel much more comfortable with 4 questions, because then I could plan for that. Just that's my advocacy. But I think that we can refine. I think different meeting managers do things differently. And I know, I try to anticipate what my board members' questions may be based on how I understand what their concerns are. And I think the more we can do that, the better. So I also would ask, just reiterate, which I know has been said, getting the documents ahead of time, but perhaps we want to think about an opportunity for board members to submit some of those questions, especially data requests, prior to the meeting. And I'm thinking that that might actually be fairer to you, Dr. Brabrand.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, obviously to do that, we need to get the information out to you sooner. And I fully admit we could do it better. The reality is, if you look at the board calendar over the since COVID, we've met, we're meeting twice a week. So we can't get out yet we just can't get out of that circle of, we're trying to plan the board meeting for next week, but the time to do that doesn't happen this week because we have a board meeting, 2 board meetings this week. So that's what I think we've been doing tonight and over Saturday that is positive. If we get a little more time, we can get it in advance, and that will actually make your work better and our work better. So I know that time piece is something we've got to do better, and we're working on it.
Well, I see this, Dr. Brabrand, and I don't think that as a criticism of you. I really believe that, we have all been inundated, been doing the best that we can. But we're also in the process of building our conversations together with new members. And that might be a way a consideration.
Sure.
Okay. I will now take my turn. I think I'm the final speaker. I want to reiterate, I think, what a couple of people said. I would be very open, even though I didn't come into this conversation, and this wasn't one of the things that I put on my Post-its for this section. I think there would be some benefit if we gave ourselves 2 rounds, which is the question round and then the commentary round, so we could really listen to the dialogue and listen to each other the way that it kind of happened tonight. If we do that, though, I would like for some commitment from our board members that we're not going to embed a lot of the commentary in the question asking round, because I think that will probably not have the impact that we're hoping for. I don't think anybody's going to be surprised by this. I would not be a fan of unlimited speaking opportunities because there's 12 of us. And this is something that Megan and I have talked about quite a bit when we were working on the budget committee. Whatever happens, multiply that by 12, and then here we are. If we had unlimited speaking time, I would be very concerned regarding those of us who do have schedules. You know, even tonight, we allotted 3 hours, and it wasn't enough. And we have people who have to go, and there's some other commitments. So I would not be a fan of unlimited time at all. I am a fan of limiting the staff presentation time. I would even shoot for 20 minutes if that's all possible, because if we have the documents ahead of time, the presentation is really high level, and we don't have to hit every single slide, because both us and the public will be able to read the information ahead of time. The other thing I'm a super fan of, and we've talked about this as well, Dr. Brabrand, is if we have the opportunity to have the documents ahead of time, then we could have that one person to whom we send the questions in advance, because then that would help to reduce the question asking period during the meeting.
Yes.
I also want to echo what Elaine said. There should be some opportunity, I think, for the meeting managers to have some creativity in terms of how the presentations are made. But it doesn't mean we don't have a baseline of expectation. I think we have that now, but there should be a little bit of space for things to be addressed as they determine based on their meeting management their meeting managers meetings. I also want to follow what Stella said, which is I like us to stick to the 3-minute period, whether it's, or some time period. If it's a question asking round, maybe that's 2 minutes, then you have 3 minutes to deliberate, whatever that is, I would be open to that. And for us to reschedule if we need a second session. If we can go on, have the will of the board be shared in terms of, do we have bandwidth to go in an additional 30 minutes, an additional hour, or should just be a time that we reschedule. And also, there are a lot of times where I feel like we don't maximize our time because of repetition. So I will stop there because I think most of the things were said that I wanted to complete. Okay, at this time, I believe we have lost at least 2 of our school board members. And so we don't have the opportunity to have a full discussion. I heard some other things in this discussion that are not reflected in this document that I would like the opportunity to include to get some feedback from folks. But given that we have lost 2 school board members, and I think Stella also has a meeting to go to, a PTA meeting.
That's Melanie.
By the way, didn't you text me that you and Melanie have a PTA meeting?
No, not
Dr.
me.
Anderson.
Trying to
Dr. Anderson, I hate to interrupt, but I think Stella has a PTA meeting she needs to go to.
Who texted me that Stella and I have a PTA meeting? And I've been looking at this all night. Like, well, not all night. But for the
Maybe
past
I
30
missed a
minutes.
meeting.
Okay, well, never mind. Stella does not have a PTA meeting. I stand corrected. But having said that, I would like the opportunity to embed some of the ideas that were generated tonight to give folks an opportunity to respond to it. And then we will have to find another time to do the other 2 big issues, which are time management and use of task force. But that does not preclude anyone from giving their preliminary feedback if they are feeling comfortable to do so, because the document is going to be there and it's going to be open for your use. So at this time, it is 7:11. What I'm asking is that 1, I am going to embed some of the ideas that were shared that I thought I heard general agreements to regarding a question round and a comment round, but it is still going to be up for feedback from the board. And then we will come back to this conversation. I see we have 3 hands up, so I will ask those folks to speak really quickly so that we can proceed with our evening. Laura Jane, O'Brien, Megan, go ahead.
I just wanted to say super quickly in that vein, Rachna and I are going to try to reach out to everybody, but this seems like a good opportunity. We're going to try on Thursday for return to school to add in a little bit of what happened tonight and what we heard. So we just ask for everybody's patience, and the goal is to still do exactly what we said, a Q&A period, but then have a few minutes each where it's just board comments, like info sharing, interacting, and then go backs after that if there's any left. So as I said, Rachna and I are going to, our goal is to try to get to everybody, but if we run out of time between then and there, I just wanted folks to have the opportunity before you saw it in an email that we're going to try to incorporate some of this too. So thank you. This feedback was super helpful for Thursday too. So thank you.
Thank you. Abrar?
Yeah, 2 quick points. One, I would just ask that hopefully we can respect people when they do come up with these processes and just follow and be open-minded. And I say that as someone who tried doing questions and discussion with Elaine when we were managing and was not received very well. The second thing is I did want to flag that it is a trade-off when you consider limiting staff time for presentation and questions. So we may end up actually taking up the time asking questions, of what would have been shared anyway, particularly when our notice, when the attachments and everything are not uploaded with advanced time for us to really take a look at everything. So especially the same day posting. So maybe we have a protocol where if something is posted the same day, then we consider that we have a full presentation, as opposed to if we've had a few days to look at it, in that case, it doesn't, it's our job to look at it. So yeah, that's all.
Thank you. And the last speaker, Megan.
Thank you. First of all, to what Abrar said about getting information from staff, and if it's a shorter PowerPoint, then we might generate more questions. I will see what information I can find historically, but for the longest time when I was on this board, particularly with Tammy, we received a report with all the details and data and analysis, and then we had a PowerPoint that captured the report. Now suddenly the board just gets 50 PowerPoint slides which don't provide the data, the analysis, the context, and I think that's a contributing challenge here. So we need to look into that. I'm not asking for a 50-page report, but the PowerPoint alone can't serve for the data analysis that we need. And often staff has done the legwork and has in their brains, but we need to be able to see it and analyze it and have the public access to it as well. The only other thing, Dr. Anderson, that I will ask you to think about and talk about in chairs is, I respect all of my colleagues and I respect that we want to be highly engaged, but when the board has meetings, and there are going to be times when maybe we will go 30 minutes over, that we would then have to stop our meetings and our work because people are going to PTA meetings. That's concerning to me. This one, it's okay to stop this one short, but we're going to have other topics like return to school. And I don't think that board members going to PTA meetings versus doing our work sessions is fair to the rest of us who want to get the work done when we're scheduled, and we'll do our best to always end on time. But I just wanted to ask you that as chair. I fully support what you're proposing tonight, but I would be troubled if this was TJ admissions or AP, and I think we need to have that conversation with each other too. So thank you.
I think I'm going to just jump a little bit and just share something with you that I'm sure is very similar with the rest of my colleagues, particularly the ones who had to leave tonight. It's topic dependent. I had somebody invite me to their meeting. I said, nope, this is TJ admissions. I don't know when we'll be finished, so I can't accept that invitation. So I think this evening was possibly an opportunity for them to do both. But I hear what you're saying, and we will be sure to address that. I see that we have 2 more hands that have just propped up. So we'll have those last 2 folks be the last 2 speakers. Have you completed your statements, Megan? Yep, she's gone, so she must
Yes,
have.
I'm done. Thank you.
Tammy, Stella, Karen. There will be no go backs here, folks. Shares privilege.
Shares privilege. I wanted to, just since Megan had mentioned my name, she is correct in saying that that was the way things were often created. And I think that is correct that sometimes staff does have that data, but it's not reflective in the PowerPoint. I think that should be a topic of conversation for Scott. We need, and you even said, Scott, you and I, when we were having a conversation about something else, you were going to continue to standardize this where, this is what the PowerPoint will look like and this is what the report will look like. So I do want to, include that kind of standardization. And I hope, Scott, you can speak to that. Just let me finish my thought here. And I do think there is the other portion about what is happening tonight. I have to say that, and hopefully we'll get to the point where we don't have to do that. But I have my advisory committee tonight, which was an important advisory committee because I'm on APAC and we've done a lot of information on that. But I declined the invitation for that because I said there is no way we will be done or get done. And I think maybe we kind of need to I don't even know how to, it's an individual board member choice to do that, obviously, correct? I get that. But I think maybe there needs to be some standardization of like, this is one where we'll need you for the whole time or we won't. And maybe I misunderstood that because this was a retreat of such, and in which case I thought every board member needs to stay till the end, and I never believed it was going to be done at 7. So, that's why I declined which was another important meeting. So I just wanted to comment on that and say I agree with that, and I think that's also part and parcel of how we respect each other, what we do, how we do it, and I'm done with my comments. So Scott, you could answer that question.
Yes, Tama, we are working on doing a shorter PowerPoint with an accompanying report. Absolutely.
A more comprehensive data report, I know Marty's very familiar with what Megan and I were speaking of.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Karen, I'm so sorry. Stella, you are on this list, or?
It's okay. I was just gonna say that Scott has agreed to do the report. So anyway, I'm done.
I thank you. Karen?
Great. Thank you so much for agreeing to return to doing the reports, because I think that will help our work a lot. So thank you, Scott, for doing that. I'm glad you agreed to that. But I wanted to just thank my fellow board members and my colleagues for actually doing the hard work of having some of these discussions tonight. And so I know we are at the end, but I did want to thank everybody who put together the work tonight.
Thank you, Karen. On that note, we have Abrar.
Ricky, don't kill me. I'm sorry. I know.
Wait. Did you already have a go back, Abrar?
It's about not ending the meeting.
No, if you did, I'm not going to give you a second go back because we kind of have to wrap up. But I'm going to
take. But it's a motion to not end the meeting.
Yeah, it's a retreat, so I'm not sure where that's going.
Okay, I want to be respectful. So, all right.
Okay. I do want to say, in the spirit of Saturday, I wasn't sure what I was walking into with today's follow-up, but I've been very pleasantly surprised in terms of how we were able to have this very, very dignified discussion. And it didn't mean that we agreed. There were a lot of different points of view, but I felt like that was exactly what I had asked for Saturday: space to disagree and space to be respectful of differences in opinion. Thank you all for engaging in weird things this evening. No, that sounds bad. Thank you for engaging in new in different ways of doing work this evening, whether it be the Google document or kind of the round robin question and then the comment period that we had with the first section. I appreciate it. It's not lost on Stella and myself in terms of how receptive people were to doing things a little bit differently, to giving grace to trying something new. And so I'm very appreciative of that. We do have some follow-up work to do here. So I know Tammy is traveling. So some point this evening, I will add some of the commentary to this discussion rule. And then as we have a chance to speak, both Stella and I, we will come back to the board with what are our next steps in this area. So thank you all for your time. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your flexibility. And I really, really mean that this evening. So have a good night, 7:21.
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Good night.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.